Council President, council members, and participants, we are now live.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone. We really appreciate you being here today. This is the public meeting and the public hearing of the City Council Committee of the Whole and the Board of Education and the Mayor. And we're going to now call this to order pursuant to Section 12-209 of the Home Rule Charter and Resolutions number 181014. Thank you very much. Mr. Christmas, will you please call the roll?
Council Lady Bass.
Good afternoon. I am present. Thank you very much.
Council Lady Brooks.
Good afternoon. I'm present.
Councilman Dom.
Good afternoon. I'm present.
Councilwoman Godier.
Good afternoon, present.
Council Lady Gilmore Richardson.
Good afternoon, Council President and colleagues. I'm present.
Councilman Green.
Good afternoon, Council President. Good afternoon, colleagues. I am present.
Council Lady Gim.
Good afternoon, Council President. Good afternoon, colleagues, and to our school board. I am present.
Councilman Heenan. Councilman Johnson. Councilman Jones.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, Mr. President. Good afternoon, colleagues. I am present.
Councilman O.
Good afternoon. I'm present.
Councilman O'Neill.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Council Lady Parker.
Mr. President and colleagues, I'm present.
Council Lady Corona Sanchez.
Good afternoon, Council President, and thank you everyone for your patience.
Councilman Squilla.
Good afternoon, all present.
Councilman Thomas.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm present.
Council President Clark.
Good afternoon, and thank you all very much. Quorum of the council members has been established, and I recognize the presence of the Board of Education member and the Mayor of the City of Philadelphia, James Kennedy. This public meeting and public hearing of the Council Committee of the Whole, the Board of Education, and the Mayor are for purpose of coordinating our activities for the improvement and the benefit of public education in the City of Philadelphia, as required by Section 12-209 of the Philadelphia Home Rule Charter and City Council Resolution 181014. Will the clerk please read the title of the resolution?
Resolution calling for the Council Committee of the Whole to convene public meetings and public hearings pursuant to the educational supplement of the Philadelphia Home Rule Charter to review the administration, management, operation, and finances of the school district and adopt plans to coordinate the activities of the Board of Education, the Mayor, and the City Council for the improvement and benefit of public education in Philadelphia.
Thank you. Joining us today are Mayor Kenny, Board of Education President Joyce Wilkerson, Board Vice President Letitia Egea Hinton. I hope I got that right. Keep trying. Board members Julia Danzy, Mallory Fix Lopez, and Maria McCulkin, Angela McIver, Lisa Sally, Reginald Streeter, and Cecilia Thompson, and School Superintendent Dr. William Height, and student representatives Rebecca Allen and Armando Ortez. I would like to welcome you all here today for our biannual partnership meeting. Today's agenda will go as follows. First, Mayor Kenny will be recognized for remarks. Then Board President Joyce Wilkerson will be recognized for the purpose of introducing Board of Education members and the school district superintendent. The board will make a presentation on its current and upcoming initiatives, followed by questions and comments from City Council members. Dr. Height will then be recognized for a presentation on school district initiatives and plans for the current school year, followed by questions and comments from council members. We will then move to our public hearing for testimony from members of the public, and then adjournment. So at this time, Chair recognizes Mayor James Kennedy for remarks. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm pleased to open this joint meeting of the City Council, School Board of Education, and the School District of Philadelphia. This meeting is one of the many ways that we work together to ensure that all Philadelphia children have access to a quality education. The last time this meeting took place in May, we still had many children attending school completely virtually due to the pandemic. So I'm excited that today, thanks to the leadership of everyone here, all Philadelphia students in the school district can attend school in person every day of the week. This is no small accomplishment. The safety and education protocols that have been put in place represent the work of the School District of Philadelphia, the Board of Education, city departments, many dedicated teachers, school leaders, and school support professionals. And we also have to recognize the significant efforts and vital partnerships from caregivers and families throughout this last year and a half. During that uncertain time, the city and school district worked together to create access centers at rec centers, libraries, and community sites, distribute millions of meals to students and families, and provide thousands of valuable summer opportunities for students. And with the support of Comcast, we have enabled over 18,700 internet connections through PHL Connected and work to close the digital divide through improved access to access and digital navigation support. Also, during the pandemic, we moved forward with our collaboration to make sure that kids in every school have the mental health supports they need by connecting each school with a behavioral health provider. Thanks to our many partners, including the health department and CHOP, we ensured that all educators and school partners had easy and early access to COVID-19 vaccines. And we are very excited that we can now work together on the rollout of pediatric vaccines. All these efforts represent our shared commitment to supporting our city students under any circumstance. I'm proud of how we've turned this commitment into action over the years. With council support, we have invested in our school district, in community schools, in free quality pre-K and out-of-school time programs, and in free community college through the Cato Scholarship. Thanks to City Council, the Board of Education, and Dr. Height's leadership, we have laid a strong foundation for the work ahead, including the upcoming superintendent transition. I am confident that the board will continue to lead a thorough process to help find the right person to sustain and build on the progress we've already made. In the meantime, I look forward to our continued collaboration this year as our city and schools return to a more familiar routine. As we move forward, we will need to build on our partnerships to advance our shared goals. We must continue to prioritize safe learning environments for all students. We must continue to prioritize mental health and supports, and we must continue to support a talent pipeline in our schools. This effort will require a focus on racial equity and a pledge to do what is right for our students. Through our collective vision, and commitment, we can address these challenges and make the most of the opportunities to come. Much has changed because of the pandemic, but I've been happy to find, as I've resumed school visits this year, that some things are still the same, like the excitement of students when they learn something new, and the dedication of our educators who work every day to inspire and cultivate a love of learning, and the fierce commitment we all have to our city and our children. So thank you for the time, and I look forward to today's conversation. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, for those remarks. We appreciate it. We'll now like to recognize Board President Joyce Wilkerson for a presentation by the board.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having us here today to comment on the Board of Education's work. I have with me Vice President Ahea Hinton, Julia Danzy, Mallory Fix-Lopez, Dr. Maria McCulkin, Lisa Sally, Reginald Streeter, Cecilia Thompson. Dr. McGyver stepped off the board about 2 months ago, so she's not here. On behalf of all of us, I want to thank the mayor and all members of City Council for the chance to be with you and for your partnership and service to the children of Philadelphia. Today, we'd like to provide you with an update of the board's superintendent search and goals and guardrails, the board's 5-year plan that we adopted in December 2020 and began implementing in January 2021. Additionally, we'd like to introduce you to our wonderful student board reps for this school year and share information on our Parent and Community Advisory Council. As you recall, that was established as a result of a change in the Home Rule Charter. And then we'll turn to Dr. Height, who will provide you with an update on the school district's 21-22 school year. So at this point, I'd like to turn to Vice President Ahea Hinton, who is quarterbacking the district's search for a new superintendent. Please move to the next slide.
Slide 3. Okay. So thank you, President Wilkerson. In August of 2022, Dr. Height will transition from his role as superintendent for the School District of Philadelphia after having served in the role for 10 years. The search for the next superintendent began in October, and you can see from the timeline on the slide what the main components of the search will include. The board has engaged the search firm Isaacson Miller to manage the search, and we have gathered public input into the search through listening sessions and a community survey. I'll share a little bit more about our engagement process on the next slide. Later this month, we will release a report detailing the themes and feedback heard during our listening sessions and survey responses. Next slide, please, and we should be on slide 4. Thank you. At the end of last week, the board officially wrapped up the public input phase of the superintendent search process. We began on October 11th, and I'll point out that initially we were going to have 5 listening sessions, agreed publicly to 17 in 18 days, and we've since had more than that. We've had 48 in 25 days. And this was as a result of the overwhelming response by our city's diverse community organizations and institutions, and the commitment that our board had to ensure that we were inviting as many families as well as stakeholders into this process. Some of our partner organizations included AFRICOM, CARE Philadelphia, the Peel Center, UNE, the Philadelphia Housing Authority, the Office of Immigrant Affairs, Mayor's Commission on People with Disabilities, the Mayor's Commission on Asian Pacific American Affairs, along with PFT, CASA, and the African American Charter School Coalition, just to name a few. I'd like to give a special thank you to Councilmember Sanchez and Councilmember Gim for partnering with us to host listening sessions with key members of the community. The results have been that over 1,300 individuals participated in listening session, and over 1,300 surveys have been completed to date. We're keeping the survey open until Friday, November 12th, because we want to hear from more Philadelphians. The audiences and ethnicities data you see here is representative of all surveys and 87% of board-led and partner-led sessions. Zip code information was also collected, and we had in total engaged about 61 zip codes in a city that has 87 zip codes this 25-day process. So we covered about 17.1% of Philadelphia zip codes. What we heard over and over again during this listening session is how important it is for the district and the board to go beyond Center City and connect with all communities. And I think that we've done that. Board Member Danzy will now continue with this update. If you could move it to the next slide, please.
Thank you, Vice President Ahea Hinton. This slide highlights some of the recurring themes we gathered from our surveys and listening sessions. They are: we need a coalition builder. We need someone who can build a strong bench of leadership. We need a change agent. We need someone who understands the needs of and has experience working within and supporting a diverse population. We need someone who looks at current systems of inequity within our public school system. We need someone who is committed to student achievement. We need someone who is culturally competent. So what are we going to do with this information? The role of the superintendent requires some very unique skill sets, and the board is focused on finding the best person to continue moving our district forward. Step 1, we're already in the process of consolidating all feedback provided in this public input process. At the end of the month, we will publish a public report that shows all the data gathered and all of the key themes we heard during the month of October. Second, working in partnership with the search firm we engaged, Isaacson and Miller, we are going to take the feedback shared in these listening sessions and evaluate it alongside the objectives of the board's goals and guardrails, which prioritizes students and their achievement, environment, and families in all decision-making and resource allocation. Collectively, goals and guardrails and the information gleaned from this public input process will help us develop the superintendent job description and implement the search process in partnership with Isaacson Miller. Finally, I would like to add that we know the community has valuable and unique insights that can help us identify who our next superintendent should be. And we greatly appreciate everyone's participation in our survey and listening session. Board Member Sally will now present an update on goals and guardrails. And would you please move to the next slide, which is 6. Thank you.
President Wilkerson, I just wanted, before Board Member Sally starts, I just wanted to also acknowledge that Council Member Brooks also hosted a session as well. Thank you.
Board Member Sally, we can't hear you.
Sorry about that. I'm unmuted now. Okay. And thank you, Board Member Danzy. Now we would like to provide you with an update on goals and guardrails, the board's 5-year plan to raise student achievement that we adopted in December 2020 and began implementing in January of this current year. Goals and guardrails have allowed the board to set up clear expectations for student success, to monitor progress towards those expectations, and to adopt a budget and policies that provide support based on these needs of our students. To begin with, we believe that effective boards commit to a vision of high expectation for all students and set clear goals to make this vision a reality. Such boards then spend the majority of their time focused on these goals and ensuring that their school district is making progress. Our vision is clear. Now we want to ensure that all of our students are given an education that allows them to thrive, succeed, and lead in a global society. So our board has been committed to making the necessary changes to our work to give students, educators, and leaders the tools and the data they need to realize this vision. Please move to the next slide, slide 7. As a quick reminder, we have 5 academic goals and 4 guardrails. Our first 2 academic goals are focused on reading and ensuring that our 3rd through 8th grade students have the reading ability and skills they will need to succeed in their education and future lives. Our 3rd academic goal is focused on math and making sure that our 3rd through 8th grade students have the mathematical foundation that they will need to succeed. Finally, our 4th and 5th goals focus on the academic and/or career and technical skills our students need for graduation, employment, and fulfilling life beyond graduation. Just as importantly, our plan also includes 4 guardrails, which we believe are the conditions necessary to help our students learn and achieve. Our 4 guardrails foster welcoming and supportive schools, enriching and well-rounded school experiences, partnering with parents and family members, and addressing racist practices within the school district. During our monthly action meetings, board members devote time monitoring the progress of one goal or guardrail by reviewing data that indicates how on track the school district is to achieving the plan's objectives. This data review also informs our decision-making as we review the school district's policies, budgets, and initiatives. To date, the board has reviewed each goal twice and one of our guardrails. We will complete a full cycle of monitoring of each goal and guardrail by the end of the calendar year. Board Member Fix Lopez will now continue this update. Please move to the next slide.
Thank you, Board Member Sally.
Since we began monitoring goals and guardrails, certain trends have helped us identify our students' needs and then invest in targeted strategies and resources. In the first year of implementing goals and guardrails, the school district has developed the strategies and actions shown on this slide to drive progress. Although I believe that we are on the wrong slide. President Wilkerson, would you like me to continue or would you like to wait for the slides?
Can you
This is the slides that.
Okay, continue, Ms. Fix-Lopez.
Okay. In the first year of implementing goals and guardrails, the school district has developed the strategies and actions, unfortunately not shown on the slide, to drive progress. The first strategy is to implement the multi-tiered system of supports framework. This is a standards-aligned, comprehensive framework for improving academic, behavioral, and social-emotional outcomes for all students. Under this strategy, Action 1 is focused on ensuring that every student has access to grade-level instruction. This is an example of bringing a practice that has been successful in some schools to all schools across the system to provide necessary resources and targeted interventions based on the needs of our students. The second strategy is to develop leaders and teachers through the implementation of evidence-based professional learning cycles. This is a redesign of the district's approach to professional development and learning for educators by providing professional development in cycles with multiple opportunities for learning to allow educators to learn new skills and then have the opportunity to practice those skills. Additionally, part of this strategy establishes common planning time in all schools, which is a regularly scheduled, structured time when educators collaborate to review student outcomes data to inform their instructional practices. Strategy 3 is implementing a new culturally and linguistically inclusive curriculum and instructional guidance for both K-8 literacy and math. These culturally and linguistically inclusive curricula reflect on students and make learning more relevant and engaging for them. The district has developed cross-departmental strategy implementation teams that are supporting schools and educators district-wide to bring these strategies to the classroom. At monthly meetings, we hear updates on these strategies from staff and how they expect to impact progress on a goal or guardrail. We welcome you to participate by watching one of our monitoring sessions from a past or future meeting to learn more about this work. Board Member Strader will now share an update on student board representatives. Please move to the next slide.
Thank you, Board Member Fix-Lopez. This year, the board welcomed 2 new students to serve as non-voting student board representatives. Rebecca Allen is a junior at Central High School who has committed herself to advocating on behalf of her peers through her involvement with proactive student groups. Rebecca is the co-founder of Unheard, which means uprooting negligence by habituating equity and anti-racism through real discussions, a group that holds discussions and workshops focused on equity and inclusion. Rebecca also serves as the co-chair for PA Youth Votes, Alliance Chair for the Philly Black Student Alliance, and she is a member of the Nexus team, a group that works to build relationships at Central High School through restorative justice practices. Our second student board representative is Armando Ortez, a senior at Northeast High School. As a first-generation Honduran American, Armando has committed himself to ensuring that all students have access to safe, comfortable spaces that they may not have at home. Armando currently takes dual enrollment courses at Community College of Philadelphia. Armando also works to support English language learners in his school community while participating in various sports. Please move to the next slide, which is slide 10. This year, Rebecca and Armando have identified 3 guiding principles for their work. Those principles are exposure, advocacy, and diversity. Since they began their term, Rebecca and Armando have worked together using their unique voices and perspectives to ensure that students have a voice in the discussion-making process. Over the past few months, Rebecca and Armando have been hard at work to accomplish these goals. The students kicked off their year meeting with the PHL Youth Commission and Community Schools cohort to discuss the impact of the program. Additionally, Rebecca joined a cohort of student board representatives from across the country to discuss key topics affecting all students and ways to use their position as a way to advocate for her peers. Most recently, Rebecca and Armando, alongside former student board representatives Alfredo Pratico, Julia Frank, and Toluwanimi Olaweye participated in the National Council of Great City Schools 65th Annual Fall Conference, where they presented and advocated for every school district to have student board representatives. They clearly stated that having positions such as a student board representative is the only way that students can have a true voice in district governance. Before closing, I'd like to note that Rebecca and Armando continue to participate in the board's monthly action meetings and play a key role in helping us in our monthly progress monitoring around goals and guardrails. Rebecca and Armando ask thoughtful questions of the district staff and challenge us as a board to remember that all we do impacts their educational experiences and outcomes. As a board, we thoroughly enjoy having student board representatives and thank Rebecca and Armando for their ongoing efforts to ensure that student voice is heard. We are thrilled to have the opportunity to work alongside them this year. And with that, Board Member Thompson will now present an update on the Parent and Community Advocacy Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Streeter. The board's Parent and Community Advisory Council continues to serve as a primary source for consistent and timely feedback from families and the community. Members of the Parent and Community Advisory Council provide the Board of Education with input and guidance on the interests and concerns of Philadelphia public school parents, caregivers, and community members. Members of the Parent and Community Advisory Council are trusted resources in their respective communities and support the board in serving as a link between the community and the Board of Education to share accurate and up-to-date information, creating a consistent feedback loop. The Parent and Community Advisory Council is currently composed of 17 members representing 16 zip codes across the city. Parent and Community Advisory Council members represent district and charter school parents and guardians, faith-based leaders, community members, and district staff members. The Advisory Council has been a crucial part of the work of the board and has been invaluable in helping us establish our goals and guardrails. In the past 2 years, they have helped us host focus groups to collect input as we develop our goals and guardrails. And this year, they helped us host listening sessions as we began our superintendent search. Additionally, members of the Parent and Community Advisory Council collect feedback and input from their school communities each month on board action items and policies. Their reach into their networks and school communities has been a strong asset to our work of community engagement and outreach, and we are grateful for their efforts. President Wilkerson will now conclude this presentation. Please move to the next slide.
Thank you, Board Member Thompson. We thank you for inviting the board here today to share an update on our work, and we're happy to answer any questions you might have before we turn to Dr. Height.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for your continued commitment to the children of the city of Philadelphia. We really appreciate it. It would be good if we could pay you, but it's not a charter authorized option at this time. But on a serious note, I really appreciate what you all have done. It's so significant to give up your time, understanding the need for us to have the appropriate direction for our young people. I do have one question for the board, Ms. Wilkerson, and whoever may choose. A few years ago, this council and the mayor, we put in place, and I want to thank those individuals from the General Assembly that assisted us in ensuring that the city of Philadelphia become truly a Philadelphia school board, no longer dominated by members of state authorized assembly board members, where we get to have a process that allows us to establish. And we wanted to emphasize that it was an independent school board because we didn't want people, in the middle of micromanaging the school board. But as you know, we are responsible for some aspects of the operation in the school board, primarily around funding. But at the end of the day, we will be held responsible, like all are, as it relates to the function. And so with that said, I do want to ask the question, and this is actually, at least in my mind, has been magnified because I had this feeling for quite some time. Like many things, the COVID-19, the pandemic has magnified a lot of different things, inequities, shortcomings, racism, all kinds of things. But one of the things that it has done in terms of opportunities, employment, careers, business startups, I don't think things will ever be the way it used to be. That's just a simple reality. We're sitting here now having this conversation on computers versus being in our wonderful chamber. We'd love to get back there at some point in time. As it relates to curriculum, we've said and give some conversation around the curriculum of the school district. I used to always say, and I still continue to say, that I always felt that we were so focused on children being able to pass the test and not focus nearly enough on the job opportunities and the careers that are presented before us, particularly in the city of Philadelphia. As we have realized how the city will be different, education will be different, has there been any serious thought or significant, I don't want to say serious, significant thought about having a real look at the curriculum, focusing on those job opportunities that will realize sustained growth, as opposed to the basic education, which we understand we need. But this has really shown that there are growth industries, and there are some industries that could basically be diminished dramatically as a result of a pandemic or some other unforeseen incident in this country. So long question, don't mind a long answer, but you can kind of talk to me about what the thought is around changing some of the curriculum. I notice you, Ms. Wilkerson.
Yeah. Sooner rather than later, I'll pivot and turn it over to Dr. Hite to talk more about the curriculum. In shaping goals and guardrails, it was important to the community and the board that it not be simply about passing tests. And so a number of our guardrails, in particular our second guardrail, focuses on making sure that we have well-rounded students and that extracurricular activities are integrated into the curriculum. More to your point, though, we also are looking at progress in our CTE schools and the kind of issues that you bring up. Is it a relevant curriculum? What kind of connection is there to industry? Is a critical part in the kinds of questions that we're asking. But I want to turn to Dr. Hite because the district's doing a lot of work around curriculum. As we consider KOZs, the board and the district are actively involved in looking for additional opportunities for students to intern, to have exposure, to find mentors, but would ask Dr. Hite to provide a more focused response on the specifics.
Thank you, Madam President, and good afternoon, Council President and members of Council. And I'll be able to talk through the question more in depth as a part of my presentation, but I do want to add, so the short answer is yes, we are doing a lot of what you just requested, and I'll give a couple of examples. And so thinking through the work that we're now partnering with the community college on, I know the Councilwoman Kiona Sanchez and Councilwoman Gilmore Richardson were with us recently at Frankfurt High School when we announced the solar energy program out there, which is the first of its kind in the nation. And so we're excited about that. But we're also now in conversations with Amazon around a logistics training center so that our young people can be equipped with the types of skills to move directly into those experiences and those jobs that will be available. And those are three examples of things that we are doing to enhance what our young people are exposed to while they're in our high schools. And in addition, really expanding not only just to the CTE schools, but beyond the career and technical education schools, so that even neighborhood high schools will have some type of program offering, like the program that is now offered at Frankfurt. So just that's a shorter answer to a longer question, but the short answer is yes, we are doing that.
Let me be a little more refined. I've been saying for a while, ever since we took a trip out to the Job Corps down in the old armory, and we saw the healthcare training down there, and I was just amazed. I had no idea what was going on. The city of Philadelphia, it may be probably number one employer in the city of Philadelphia, healthcare institution. It will continue to grow. And I always talk about traveling out 34th Street. It is an entire city. And Councilwoman Gauthier can talk to you about that, the growth out there. And these jobs in healthcare are labor intensive. Councilwoman Gilmore Richardson, you referenced her, this initiative that she's working with, I think IBX and I believe it was one of the unions. The reality is that with somewhat minimal training, we can move people from one stage in their life to a much higher paying stage and a stage with much more benefits. And my question is on things like that, and I appreciate what you've just laid out. I just continue to think that healthcare is just something that's in my mind. I may not know what I'm talking about, which a lot of people say. I just think that this whole healthcare thing, I mean, it's just so labor intensive, and too many people that should be in position to be working out at 34th Street and throughout the city of Philadelphia in these industries should have those opportunities as opposed to people coming in on the train every day from the suburbs. Are we going to have a...
Yeah, so thank you for specifying the question to healthcare, and that's one of the pathways. That's one of the pathways that's a budding industry. Well, it's always been a industry here in the city of Philadelphia, and not just with as you described, the minimal training, but also the experiences, so that while young people are receiving that training, they are also having work-based experiences with some of those institutions. And so just as I talked about the solar program or or some of the other logistical programs, but health in the health sciences field and all of the jobs associated with healthcare are also a part of that. And that's a whole separate career pathway that we will be we will be dramatically ramping up as a part of what we offer to young people. And it's at several schools now, but we think we can expand that to quite a few more.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Heighton, President Wilkerson. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Gim.
Thank you very much, Council President. And again, I think I recognize that there's a number of questions that can apply to Dr. Height and his coming presentation. But I did have a couple of very specific questions for the board. And again, first of all, I want to thank the board for its patience. I know this was a long day, and we had there's obviously important committee hearings that go on all the time, but just appreciate the board's patience and especially the public's patience, because I know a lot of people are watching from home and how much time it takes. One of the things, and I know this will be discussed at some point, but as the board, one of the central issues for the board will be to think about a large-scale planning process that is concurrent with the next superintendent. And as you know, a number of us on City Council were at SLA Beaver in September, which was the 12th school to close in the last 2 years because of problems within the building. And in general, the district has suffered tremendously from the consequence of decades of failing to invest in modernizing school facilities, planning out for growing populations that are happening all across the city of Philadelphia. Some schools, elementary schools, in fact, that can be larger than college campuses, which shows promise, really, for the district. The last facilities assessments were completed in 2017 and documented a need of nearly $5 billion over 10 years. And one of the challenges was that those assessments didn't actually result in a robust process to develop a master plan that was in partnership with educators, families, communities, neighborhood stakeholders. Cities like DC have engaged in deep and regular long-range facilities planning processes that result in master facilities plans that are regularly updated and lay out a clear plan for not just remediation and repair, but for modernization, construction, projected costs, and priorities in terms of schedule. So my question for the board is, are the updated facilities assessments completed at this point? When are you making them public? And will they include information on school modernization needs?
The district, the board has not received the updated reports. I know the district has been working on that. That is a key component to the development, after consultation with the broader community, developing a plan for 21st century schools. And so there's a lot of work that needs to happen. We are awaiting a report from the district and an opportunity to review those materials so we can also have those conversations with the broader community. I think we agree with you that it's not good enough to simply patch these old buildings. These buildings, in many cases, don't serve, can't support 21st century education. And that's really our starting point. What should a 21st century education look like? And then what is it that a building needs to consist of in order to support that education? So we're mindful of the need to take a broader view of the challenge in front of us, and we will certainly be sharing documents, as they become available to us.
Thank you very much, Chair Wilkerson. And similarly, I guess the question really is about whether you have thought through the timing of what a facilities master plan can look like, given that we need significant and robust community engagement. There's a capital budget that needs to be developed. There's a city budget that needs to be concurrent. As you know, there's always state money that needs, that can and should, I think most of us agree, should be in more significant play. But I assume that, part of this is that we don't want to restart this process with the new superintendent, given your timeline being August of 2022 for the arrival and formal installation of the superintendent, but that we actually need things to move now. So can you give any indication about a timeline for development?
We're engaged in conversations with the district now. I think we're very sensitive as well to, and in particular, Dr. Hyatt is, feels a commitment to his successor, that the successor not walk into the same situation that he encountered when he became superintendent. So we're conscious of the timeline, trying to figure out how much of the conversation we can have in the coming months. But we expect to be able to provide feedback on what a process might look like by the end of the year, I would think.
Okay, by the end of this calendar year.
Yeah, just what the process might look like. We won't have launched the process, but we have a good sense of, and I don't know if, Dr. Haidt, if you want to amplify that at all.
No, I think you said it all, Board President Wilkerson, and I do think that we will have something in terms of a plan for how we engage in that round of conversations, Councilwoman Gim, and think that could easily be done by the end of this year.
Yeah. Okay, that's helpful to hear, and it certainly informs our planning process as we think about it in our city council bodies. And I know Councilman Green and myself have been talking about a hearing around financing and what a facilities plan has been looking like. So we look forward to being a partner with the school district on that. My last question for the board that's very specific to the board is specifically around the recent policy around banning school staff from communicating with media about any school issues. This has been raised as a serious consideration, being incredibly broad. And for all of us, I mean, we are all on public bodies. We are responsible for large a large and broad employee base. And, our work relies on both the strength of a unified message, no doubt, but also on the robust commitment of our staff and our team towards voice and visibility. The reality is that the greatest cheerleaders for the school district of Philadelphia will be its own team. And that includes the families and communities. I am very thoughtful and conscious about some of the needs, but I am raising concerns about a policy that has been seen as largely restrictive and potentially impinges on First Amendment freedoms. I'm wondering if the district, after reviewing some of the policy, will take into consideration any changes to it.
We have a many-step process. So we have a policy committee. The district has proposed policy 911 that sets parameters around staff speaking to the media. It was presented to the board. The board had any number of questions. So we're now actively engaged in making sausage. Something will be eventually reported out to the board at a meeting. The public will have an opportunity to weigh in. It'll lay over for an additional week, and the public will have another opportunity, as will the board, to amend whatever it is that is proposed. So we're just at the very beginning of the process. Nobody has signed off on the proposed policy 911. I'm sure there were a lot of questions that were raised at the board meeting, and I'm sure those questions will continue to be raised as we work on trying to shape a policy. So we're at the very beginning. We appreciate input from the public on, that's why we have these public meetings, so that we can try to get it right.
Mm-hmm. Understood.
Madam President, may I add, Councilwoman Kim, if that's okay, so policy 911 is also it is up for revision because it's not a new policy. It's been a policy that has existed since 2011, and we're required every so often to provide updates on those policies. And so it was a recommendation for updates, but as you heard from the board president, still a lot to do as we listen and consider all the feedback that we've heard around the set of recommendations. But it is a revision, it's not a new policy, and it is nothing that is intended to either gag or restrict individuals from speaking freely, to your point.
Okay. Yes. No, we appreciate it because, as I said, I think all of us run very large organizations. Transparency is a challenge, but it has been one of the best ways that we've been able to drive some resources and collaboration with the district. So strongly believe in upholding First Amendment rights and to free speech, and we'll be following this closely. So Council President, those are my questions for the school board. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Brooks.
Thank you so much, Council President. I want to follow up on Councilmember Gim's questions about the newly introduced policy about the staff's ability to speak to reporters. I was wondering, are there any other large districts with similar policies?
I don't know the answer. We're researching that, and we'll be, happy to make that information available to see how other districts are handling it.
Okay, because once you get that information, I have some concerns about how will this be enforced. Like how will this be enforced? And then my second question to that, like, why is there a need for this policy now?
So our policy committee is engaged around those very issues. I want to also note that there are other avenues we hear from faculty all the time, from staff all the time at our board meetings, and so want to assure the public that there are opportunities for employees to come forward and express concerns. But we are going to take a hard look on the revisions that are proposed for the policy, and like you said, we're going to be taking a look at what works nationally before we make any final decisions about whether to have a policy, whether to revise the policy. So we're at the very, very beginning of this process.
Because I just want to add, like, in my years of advocacy and activism, the press has been a major factor in getting things done. And although I was not a staff of the School District of Philadelphia, many complaints that staff and parents had made in several schools were not heard, or they were ignored until we put press into it, which was like a huge catalyst in some of the major changes that we see in the school district today. So I definitely have some concerns about this level of censorship, because just from my experience, a lot of complaints fall on dead ears, or piled up in lists of papers and write-ups. So I really would be paying very close attention on how this policy is implemented and carried out. I have another question about the vacancies. I noticed that there's still one vacancy. Do you have any sense on when a new school board member will be appointed? And what's the timeline for getting a full school board?
We have to have those conversations with the administration. And one of the things that we're all learning is that being a board member is an extraordinarily challenging, it's challenging, and trying to figure out what reasonable I worry about what reasonable expectations are for terms for board members. When you look nationally, it's interesting, it breaks down in part based on the age of the board member. Younger board members tend to serve 3 years or less, and then when you get to vintage board members like myself, we're on the board much longer. But it's trying to figure out a cadence for bringing new board members on. I also worry about the Home Rule Charter does not provide for staggered terms. And so we will have all 8 board members, 9 board members, if we get a new appointee, stepping down when a new mayor is appointed, and have concerns about how that plays out. But we are, we will be talking with the administration. We're down 1 board member, and it's also a challenge bringing new board members on. There's a lot of orientation that has to happen, getting people up to speed. So that's an issue that we're cognizant of, and we'll be talking with the administration. I
definitely understand that it's a very time-consuming and rewarding but thankless job. So I hear that. So I just had some concerns about it.
And I don't want you to think that board members are complaining, because like we just finished having 46 engagement sessions. Board members, I think particularly with our work around goals and guardrails, feel that we're focused in a way that will result in positive outcomes for students. And so we feel that our time is well spent, but it's very demanding. And, one thing I just worry about not having staggered terms. And
yep. So I just want to echo Council President's sentiment early on, that I definitely understand the need for this opportunity potentially to be a paid opportunity for board members, because it's hard to serve such long hours and still maintain a job. That's probably why some of the less seasoned board members aren't able to stay on, why they have families and jobs to uphold. So I just want to let you know I hear that, and we'll continue to work towards that. I have a few questions around the superintendent search process.
I'll turn it over to Letty Ahea Hinton.
Okay.
Okay, I am on.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I see that you reported that you engaged around 1,300 individuals and received almost the same number of survey responses.
Yes.
Remind me how many students are in the school district of Philadelphia?
You want to know how many students are in the city of Philadelphia?
Yeah, aren't there like 200?
Yeah, there's over 200,000.
So if we were to think about engagement as a percentage, we're talking about less than like 1% of the total student population is being represented in this feedback so far. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And has there been any process for gathering student feedback into the search process?
Actually, we have reached out to students, but we have also been working with our student board reps who have also been reaching out to their, to the student board, to the to the student community themselves. We have ensured that students had the opportunity. I mean, we do send out the surveys to them, etc. Are there other ways that we could possibly engage students? Probably, but I know that we have been really pushing and trying to get our student population in schools to really engage in this, especially our high school students.
Okay, thank you for that. Do you have any plans on increasing engagement? I know you guys mentioned, the number of engagement, and my office also did a listening session. Do you plan on doing any more to increase the sample size?
Well, we have extended the survey portion of the engagement to the 12th of the month. So that's one way that we're doing it. I know that, and I'm not trying to put the Councilwoman Gim, I know she's having a number of sessions as well. So that's one of the significant ways that we thought we would be able to reach out. One thing that I will say is what we've learned, that there are a number of takeaways in engagement, because we recognize that, we've not always been credited with being the best at engaging larger communities or communities across the board. And we discovered that one of the ways that we were most successful, besides the virtual listening sessions, but what we call tabling, actually going out to schools and engaging with parents, like, having information for them out there when they were picking up their children. So we've had a lot of lessons that we've learned in terms of how to engage, but at this point we've not, other than the survey, we've not discussed extending more listening sessions.
Thank you. Council President, I have one more question. Can I proceed or put it on the next round?
Go ahead, Councilwoman. Go ahead.
So you talked about the demographics, and how did the demographics of the people we have engaged so far compared to the demographics of the students and families in the school district?
Oh boy. I'm sorry. I'm trying to remember. I think that most of the population, and I don't have the numbers directly in front of me, but most of the percentage of the population was African American. And is that what you're talking about, Councilwoman?
Yes. I just kind of like, I heard you mention earlier that so far it's been like over 40% of white folks and 14% of the students in the district are white. So how are we going to incorporate some of these other ethnic groups? And
well, one thing we had the slide that we had presented to you that provided some of the ethnicities, and one thing I wanted to point out to you is that the ethnicities portion of the survey, people completed it voluntarily, so we didn't necessarily, we couldn't require it, of course, right? So we know that that most of the information is not complete in that way. I'm sorry, I lost your question altogether.
Just like are there any intentions or there's a plan on how to engage a broader cross section of folks that aren't represented into the survey?
Well, go ahead, I'm sorry.
The Latinx community was pretty low, I think. How can we make sure that everyone's
Well, one of the things that we did, understanding this, we kind of knew that we wanted to really reach out and connect with communities that normally would not connect with us. That's why when we started preparing for the listening sessions, what we did was we engaged with key organizations in these communities, like AFRICOM, Congreso, those types of groups. We even went to Taller Puertorriqueño. It was an in-person listening session that I went to. So we've really been relying on these key organizations to help us do that.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time.
Council President, could I a brief point of information?
Say that again. I'm sorry. Who?
This is Councilmember Gim. Could I just just a brief point of information?
Yeah, Councilwoman Gim.
Thank you so much, Council President. First, I wanted to thank all of the board members and commissioners. I do hope, we are doing a couple of upcoming sessions. We'll also include some more intensive dialogue with many of our immigrant communities, some of whom comprise the majority of schools in many different parts of the city. Mayfair, Kirkbride, Key have predominantly immigrant student population. So we welcome the school board's presence at these hearings, one of which will include about 50 young people through one of the organizations that we often partner with, and Council NOMO will be having that. So we certainly welcome the school board to participate and hear directly from young people, and look forward to, recognizing that there's a formal process, but hopefully that they'll find some space for continuing to listen on people's priorities. So thank you very much, Council President.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilman Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to briefly say, you took me aback when you talked about how long Dr. Height had been here, and it was 10 years. It seemed like only last year I asked him a question in the budget session about how he would sometime in the future give the report card of his progress over time. I'm not going to ask him to do that today, but I will ask that same question and series of questions during the budget process a little later on. What I'd like to focus on right now is some of the issues revolving around the school to prison pipeline and some of the issues interrelated to some of the violence in and around our schools, and kind of give the third leg of that stool to the high number in some schools. And Councilwoman Gim has kind of chronicled some of those schools where violence is more likely to occur, and how we are going to break that cycle, school to prison pipeline. One achievement I will note that over the years, we've always asked how we break that school to prison pipeline by creating a school to paycheck pipeline, which was done with our motor vehicles division, where 1/3 of their workforce now comes from CTE schools in Philadelphia, which I'm thankful to the school district for doing. But help me to understand how we can and how you can be a part of that solution we all face, whether it's courts, prisons, police, and just citizens dealing with the population within your care that find themselves confronted with daily violence.
Can I suggest that we have Dr. Height make his presentation, and then I can also respond, to some of these issues from the board's perspective. But I think Dr. Height intends to comment on some of the activities of the board to address violence.
Well, I appreciate being forward thinking and my questioning, so I will wait for that answer.
And then if Dr. Height doesn't adequately address it, I'll offer.
It's in my presentation, Councilman Jones. So,
All right, I will delay.
Yes.
I'm okay. I'll wait.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Gauthier.
Council President, she had to step away and ceded her question, so we have Councilman O and Isaiah Thomas in the queue.
Chair recognizes Councilman O.
Thank you very much, Council President. I have questions about the change in process for selection. I believe selection to magnet schools. I'm not sure if that's everything or if there's a difference. My understanding, and I may be wrong, is there's 36 magnet schools. Did this apply to all magnet schools, some magnet schools? I'm not clear on that.
I want to have Dr. Height respond so that the response can be accurate.
yes, and so Councilman O, that's also in my presentation. I'd like to talk about the school selection process and the change of that.
I'm
To
not
your
going
question, there are approximately 35, 36. We call them criteria-based schools, and then some are citywide admission schools. That includes our CTE schools, some of the performing arts schools, and then there are only, I think, 5 schools that are criteria-based, or that's where someone has to meet a certain criteria in order to enroll. But we'll talk about that as a part of the presentation, because that is a part of my presentation as well.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I said 35. There are 21 criteria-based schools.
Thank you. Councilman, is that the only question you had?
Yes, Council President, that's pretty
Right.
much it. I mean, I will be asking about asbestos and that whole thing, but I think that's probably part of the presentation. I'll wait to see.
Okay. Why don't we do this? I think we have Councilman Thomas teed up, and then after Councilman Thomas, Councilwoman Quinona Sanchez will come on to give a statement, a halftime statement, and then we'll get the presentation from Dr. Height. And then we'll ask questions. I see a lot of the questions are probably best answered by Dr. Height as the operations manager of the school. Councilman Thomas?
Thank you, Council President, and good afternoon, everybody. I just want to take a moment to lift up the voice of my colleagues when they talked about their support and concern around the idea of restricting people from being able to talk to the press. I also want to reiterate Council President's concern around curriculum. That's something we've been pushing for some time. I too hear this concern around board members being paid. That is something that I think needs to do a deeper dive. I did not hear anything around the issues around Black equity, Black charters, and when Dr. Height speaks, I do look forward to hearing what he has to say around sports and the direction that we're going to go in around sports, because I heard that mentioned briefly by the board, but there was nothing in depth. So I look forward to that from Dr. Height, but I would love to hear an update on where we are as it relates to the work being done around equity, around the Black Charter initiatives that we discussed in the past, and how the inclusion process is going as it relates to some level of transparency.
Okay. With respect to the investigation that the board has launched pursuant to the allegations by minority-led charters, the investigation's in its early stages, so there's limited information we can provide. The board has retained Ballard Spahr to conduct the investigation. Ballard Spahr has agreed to conduct the investigation on a pro bono basis pursuant to its pro bono initiative. Marcel Pratt, partner at Ballard, will lead the investigation with a team of Ballard lawyers. The firm will also team up with a consultant that specializes in racial equity analysis. A consultant has not yet been retained. The investigators will conduct an investigation into specific allegations of unlawful discrimination and whether there are discriminatory effects of charter authorizing practices more generally. They'll also provide recommendations for moving forward. The investigation will be independent and not subject to any restrictions, limitations, or prohibition imposed by the school district unless required by law. A final report will be made public. The anticipated date for the completion of the report is August 22, although the timeline may be altered as the investigation proceeds. The board is consulting with other stakeholders to define the scope of the investigation, including members of the council and representatives of the charter sector. The investigation, as I said, is still in its early stages. This is all that we have to share right now.
Thank you for sharing that information. I just want to note for the record that there are a number of different stakeholders as well as council members who are concerned about the process thus far. And we want to make sure that there remains some level of transparency as it relates to the report so that we can assure that it is genuine, authentic, and reflective of the experiences that so many have communicated as it relates to their concern. Thank you, Council President. I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Sanchez.
Thank you, Council President. I really wanted to be brief because I know we're delayed. I just wanted to take a moment and really thank the members of the Board of Education. I think as President Wilkerson has highlighted, the amount of work and related to this and the expectations from this locally controlled board have been tremendous. And I want to thank them for stepping up to the plate. The mayor and the administration and their selection committee. And, you know, we will continue to work not only through our role as you know, the tax authority, but really try to support and uplift the board as they make, you know, the necessary policy decisions to move the school board forward. I particularly, and I know Councilmember Thomas just brought it up, I think one of the areas where we see the board really responding to concerns has been around the conducting of the investigation around the Black charters. And we hope to use that process and the tenseful conversations around that, around what locally the board does, and then how council views and interacts with that around policy formation, but really getting to an issue around equity as decisions are made. So I just wanted to, you know, as we move to Dr. Height and to the operations piece, really thank all the school board members for the education committee members who helped host some of the engagement. We've had many conversations between the education committee, Dr. Height and Joyce Wilkerson, and this community engagement piece continues to be on the forefront. And there's a real sense of urgency and need for us to do everything and anything we could to engage stakeholders in really meaningful ways, and hope that the process of the search leading to the new superintendent, that is clear and really built in. And I appreciate that the president and the school board members have really been open to those really honest conversations that have been going on. So thank you very much, Council President, and to the board members as we moved on to the operations. I want to thank the Education Committee, who again is very active in all of these discussions, and the rest of council for the work that they have been doing with the school district. Thank you very much, Council President.
Councilwoman, hand off.
All right, thank you. So catching the football, I will now allow Dr. Height to make his presentation, and then we will queue up the questions from our colleagues. Thank you very much. Dr. Height, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the work of the Education Committee and you chairing that committee. Thank you, and thanks to all of the other council members. Thanks to Council President for providing the time and space for us to do this today. And I want to reiterate all of the comments that have been said about the board members and this board under the leadership of Board President Joyce Wilkerson. I mean, the amount of work that these individuals are doing on a volunteer basis has been pretty extraordinary. And I just want to thank them for their tireless efforts to deal through a lot of complex and complicated things and do that while in many cases they have to do a lot of other things as well. So with that, I want to go to slide 13 and we will begin there. Thank you. And so naturally, I am William Height, the superintendent of the School District of Philadelphia, and thanks to all of members of council, the Education Committee in particular, for allowing us this afternoon to provide a recap of our preparations for the 22-22 school year, and to share an update around the things that we have seen as we describe success, and also be very honest about challenges to date, as well as what lies ahead for us here as a district. And as we have focused on continuity of education during one of the most difficult times in this nation to educate children, we've also kept the safety of our students and staff at the forefront of decision making. These times have forced us to pivot, to redefine, as the council president was describing earlier, how we care for our students as we support their short-term and long-term educational needs and safeguard their health and well-being. As I've said many times, it takes the village to support the educational needs of all of our diverse learners throughout the city of Philadelphia, and that has never been more true than now. And as we deal with the many consequences of this pandemic and many other traumas that our young people are experiencing over the last 20 months, we have navigated this pandemic together as a Philadelphia community, and that's exactly what is needed as we go forward. So this afternoon, I want to share with all of you an update about the work of the district, as I indicated earlier, including those things that we consider success, and identify and be very honest and upfront about the challenges to date, as well as what lies ahead. So next slide, please. So as you've already heard, the board adopted goals and guardrails. This is slide 14. They adopted goals and guardrails in December of 2020. These goals and guardrails help to serve as the guiding strategic framework for how we inside the district will move toward our vision for all children to have access to a great school close to where they live. The board aligned on 3 overarching goals and 4 guardrails to shape that work and the work of the district going forward. Next slide, please. As was shared earlier, also this year, the district is eligible for $1.1 billion in one-time funding through the summer of 2024. Means all of those monies must be spent by the summer of 2024. This is an unprecedented amount of federal funding for our district, and we are fully committed to investing these one-time funds in ways that provide the greatest long-term benefit for our students and schools without creating recurring obligations that would live longer than those funds are available, but that would also compromise our long-term fiscal stability. Our investment approach will focus on using these funds to maximize a short-term pandemic response while achieving long-term sustainable benefits. We want our approach to be active, ongoing, and we will be sharing an update on our spending plan in January and continue to share updates for the funding at various points over the next 4 years, including during the normal budget cycle. This means continually refining our approach, seeking input, sharing information, and responding to public feedback. And ultimately, we will evolve our strategies based on what is working and what is not working to support our young people and our educators. Next slide. So as we prepare to bring all students back to school for in-person learning after 18 months of virtual and hybrid learning, we took significant steps to ready our schools. Those steps included hiring more than 1,600 new employees across various positions, including teachers, psychologists, occupational and speech therapists, bilingual counselor assistants, and counselors. We launched a new academic framework, which is a more culturally and linguistically inclusive curriculum. And I know a question about curriculum was asked earlier. We are also delivered thousands of pieces and continue to deliver thousands of pieces of PPE supplies so that our schools had what was necessary in order to keep children and staff members safe. And at this time, I'd like to ask our Chief Operating Officer, Reggie McNeil, to share an update on the progress of our work related to environmental services. And I know Councilman O had an asbestos question, and I think that question, Councilman O, will be answered as a part of Chief Operating Officer Reggie McNeil's presentation. And then once Reggie finishes, I have a few more slides, and then we can get to questions. Reggie? I know he was on. I think he may need to be unmuted. It'll be RM. So, Madam Chair, yeah.
We're not force muting him, so he needs to unmute himself. Reggie, I see him.
Oh, good. Okay. And if he can't unmute, then I can cover this information. I know
Let me have our tech staff. Tech staff, could we unmute him, Modesto?
Fortunately, I can't unmute him. You have to actually go on the application and unmute.
Yeah, so I can go through this information, Madam Chair, and then if Reggie comes on, if we're able to get him on, he can respond to questions when the council members will have questions, I'm sure, about many of these issues. So
okay, we may want to ask him to sign off and sign back on just in case he's having technology problems. But thank you. If you want to go through this slide, and of course there will be questions for him. Thank you.
Yes.
Dr. Hite.
Yeah, so I'll go through these couple of slides. And so naturally, in preparing for this school year, and we took advantage of the time that our schools were closed, and we were able to get in and do some significant work around asbestos, lead paint, and lead in water. And as you know, we are following the federal law and the City of Philadelphia asbestos control regulations. And in following those regulations, we have performed over 1,300 abatement actions in 214 buildings since the summer of 20. And we also continue to vet environmental work orders, and we have now vetted some 2,600 environmental work orders, and we have closed or reassigned and another 2,600 by August of 21. And some 17 acres and 27 miles of asbestos-containing materials have been removed during this same period of time. Additionally, we have a city-approved compliance program that aims to have all district buildings lead safe by 2024. And we have prioritized elementary schools as a part of that work for many reasons. One being that younger children are more likely to consume chips of paint. And the district we've also posted those assessments and reports on the websites and then update those on a regular basis. I'm pleased to say that we have 122 schools that are lead safe, 21 schools are lead free, and 73 schools are pending an assessment. Many of those schools are schools where secondary children are attending. Additionally, we have focused on water and ensuring that we have clean and appealable and drinking water. And so the City of Philadelphia Plumbing Code Ordinance mandated all buildings sampled by November of 22. We have 127 buildings that are remaining, but we've also replaced and provided some 1,258 hydration stations. They've been installed over 200 buildings, and we estimate that there are another 1,089 hydration stations approximately remaining to be installed at a total estimated cost of about 2.7 million, and that is a part of our broader plan in order to continue to ensure that our young people and staff members have access to safe, appealable drinking water. Next slide, please. So, and I think one of the things that was important is that in addition to all of the environmental things and the capital work that happened over the last 18 months, we also doubled down on actions to prepare staff for the start of a school year who have also been out for a period of time. And the things that we did to prepare staff, and those things included a stronger focus on what we call common planning time, which is an evidence-based approach to collaboratively plan with colleagues who are in the same grade or the same content area and analyze data of their young people so that it's a state of constant improvement. And we've also provided evidence-based professional development and coaching for educators in order to improve their practice and capacity to support not just the online technology or the technology that many of students now have, but also to support the students' social and emotional needs. We've intensified our focus on student-level data, as I talked about earlier, as I was mentioned in common planning time, and that was really to strengthen educator capacity to develop what we call personalized growth plans. Some people would refer to the personalized growth plans as a system of continued support, a multi-tiered system of support, services for every student, or MTSS. And for the second year, we did not level down in order to help support and sustain strong teacher-student relationships. So even though populations of students changed at schools, and in some schools we had fewer students show up to those schools than we budgeted, we did not level down because we wanted to ensure that we had the ability to support those young people. Next slide, please. One thing that was exciting was this summer we operated programming that impacted more than 15,000 students. This past summer, students were able to participate in academic and enrichment programs for rising 1st through 8th grade, work-based experiences, and financial literacy engagement. We also had a 5th grading period for high school students who may not have been on track to be promoted or to graduate. We also had an extended school year program for children with exceptional needs. And we had virtual kindergarten open houses. Additionally, we hosted a back-to-school bus tour throughout the city where we were able to serve more than 6,000 families across 32 bus stops. And want to thank all of the council members who were able to get by one of those back-to-school bus tours events. And we also distributed over 16,000 backpacks, and 179 children were able to receive some of their required immunizations during the bus tour. Next slide. Undoubtedly, the start of the pandemic and the time that was followed has been one unlike anything that we've ever experienced before. We continue to feel the excitement of being able to return to full in-person learning for all of our students and having to operate following a virtual hybrid model. We took the lessons we learned over the course of the 18 months leading up to the start of this year to help guide our plans for school operations this year. Next slide. We know the true value of our students being in person in our school buildings. And as I have the opportunity to visit schools each week, I still see and hear the same thing. Students who are excited to be back in person, learning, socializing, receiving services, and being supported by caring and thoughtful staff. Our return to in-person learning has undoubtedly been one of the greatest successes in the past 20 months. Next slide, please. Also, one thing that I was excited about, particularly given everything that we had to do over the past 9 to 10 years. At the start of this school year, we opened 2 new buildings, and those 2 schools included Power Elementary and SLA Middle, and we call that P-SLAMs. That was a school that opened in the University Park area, the University City area, and then we had Solace Cohen, which was a new school. Then we also had one brand new school, the Northeast Community Propel Academy. Next slide, please. Other successes was that every year the U.S. Department of Education recognizes public and private elementary and middle and high schools based on their overall academic excellence or their progress in closing gaps in achievement among student subgroups. And our very own Girard Academic Music Program, or GAMP, and Penn Alexander School were 2 schools of only 325 schools nationwide honored as 2021 National Blue Ribbon Schools. They are also the only schools in Philadelphia and 2 of only 13 schools in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to achieve Blue Ribbon status this year. GAMP was designated an exemplary high-performing school, while Penn Alexander was designated as an exemplary achievement gap closing school. They are the 16th and 17th School District of Philadelphia schools named a National Blue Ribbon School since the Department of Education began this program. This recognition is a testament to the hard work and commitment of the tremendous staffs at these schools, the leaders at these schools, the students, and the families. And I also want to acknowledge the important role that the community partners and volunteers played in achieving this kind of success. Next slide, please. I'm also happy to share that our COVID positivity rates have remained below 1% since we returned to school some 10 weeks ago. We contribute this to the multiple layers of safety we have put in place, the tireless work of all district staff, especially our nurses, to support our testing efforts and safety protocols. Next slide. And as an additional layer of safety, the board passed a COVID-19 vaccine mandate in August. We know that vaccines are an effective mitigation strategy to stem the spread of COVID-19, and the science is clear. COVID-19 vaccines are proven to significantly reduce the health effects and transmissibility of the virus. This is why we view a vaccine mandate for district employees as yet another layer of protection and safety for our students and staff and their families. We're pleased with the response received by our employees regarding the mandate. Employees who chose not to comply with the mandate will be required to submit to twice weekly testing, and will no longer have access to 10 days of direct quarantine leave for employees who have tested positive for COVID-19 or have been directed to isolate following a COVID-19 exposure at a school district building. 81% of almost 15,000 employees are fully vaccinated now, and 2% or about 300 employees are partially vaccinated as they await their second shot. Mandatory weekly testing continues for all employees. Additionally, as of October 1st, all new hires must now be fully vaccinated in order to start work with the district. Next slide. And at the start of the 2021, this school year, in response to the impact the pandemic was having on our children, we launched various social emotional supports. These include a Healing Together initiative, which combines universal prevention-focused programming with supports for students suffering from the impacts of trauma and loss, and classroom-based community meetings to help teachers build and reestablish communities with students and provide safe spaces to help support students in managing difficult emotions and situations. Additionally, 99% of IEPs, or individualized education plans, that were interrupted by the pandemic have now been completed for students receiving special education services. The remaining 1% will be completed by the end of December. Next slide. This past year, in alignment with our commitment toward anti-racism and equity as outlined in the Board of Education's goals and guardrails, The school selection process underwent an initial equity review during which we collected feedback from various stakeholders, including parents and families. The purpose of this ongoing review is to help the district better understand where inequities exist within the process in an effort to make an unbiased and to make this process unbiased and accessible to all families, especially our most marginalized. As a result of our initial review, we are implementing several important changes to this year's process, including, to Councilman O's question, school selection will move to a computerized lottery system to support greater access for students who meet the qualifications. As we determined last year, PSSA scores will not be used as a criteria for admissions in this year's process. And quite frankly, the rationale behind that is that many of our young people did not take the PSSAs a year ago, or the year before for that matter. 6 underrepresented zip codes will be prioritized at 4 criteria-based schools for students who meet the minimum qualifications. School selection and wait lists will be managed centrally, and letters of recommendation and interviews are no longer required for eligibility or admission. The online application will be available in 9 different languages, and an online writing sample is required for students applying for 9th grade admissions to the following schools: Central, Engineering and Science, Masterman, Palumbo, and Parkway Center City. While we continue to look critically at our school selection process, it is our hope that the changes we made this year will be a catalyst for long-term improvements to school selection and provide greater opportunities for all students to attend the school of their choice. As a reminder, the school selection application closes on November 21st at 11:59 p.m. Next slide, please. We were also able to successfully negotiate new union contracts that support our work to strengthen schools and increase supports for staff. This includes new student-centered, equity-based academic programs. The first one being the Cross-School Learning Program, which gives middle school students equitable access to algebra coursework, regardless of if that course is offered at their school or not. And the second is the development of a 21st century schools model. And this model enables students to determine a career pathway upon entering high school. And it will be focused on work-based experiences, to the council president's questions earlier, the use of innovative technology, modalities, mentoring, project-based learning, variation in assessments and application of learning, and courses aligned to graduation requirements, post-secondary employment, post-secondary education, or a combination of all of those. We are in the planning phases for both of these programs and look forward to continued collaboration with labor partners in preparation for launching. Additionally, under the new contract, there will be salary increases for all staff. All staff will be paid at least $15 per hour, targeting retention and recruitment bonuses, or targeted retention and recruitment bonuses, earlier annual hiring and pay incentives to help recruit and retain great teachers and leaders in our highest need schools, and a new career development program for paraprofessionals. Those are teachers' aides who work as paraprofessionals, and we have created now a new career development program that will allow those individuals to become certified educators. A transition from a caseload model to a workload model for our OT staff, our PT staff, and speech and language staff. Next slide, please. And in order to fulfill our commitment toward anti-racism and equity as outlined in our statement on anti-racism, and to ensure its sustainability, we established an Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion that supports our goal to lead and sustain systems-level change. This aligns with our work to advance Guardrail 4. Our students' potential will not be limited by practices that perpetuate systemic racism and hinder student achievement. Over the past year, the work of this office has expanded significantly and includes establishment of an equity coalition, the completion of a year 1 equity audit, development and ongoing implementation equity framework, development and implementation of professional learning pathways. And we've launched inaugural Equity Partners Fellowships that also includes high school students, and strengthening district-wide DEI awareness and cultural competencies. Next slide, please. The national, I talked about earlier, also talking about challenges and the national driver shortage, which is severely impacting schools, how trash was collected, and food vendors and other companies across the nation continues to significantly disrupt our student transportation and trash removal operations. While the district employs just under 200 bus drivers, the majority of the district's transportation services are provided by local transportation vendors. The transportation schedule for this school year was developed based on an initial commitment of 1,092 drivers across 9 non-district owned vendor garages, as well as the 192 planned drivers across our 3 district garages. As of September 9th, our district garages had only 3 vacant positions, which we have been actively recruiting for. However, the vendors we rely on heavily have been impacted much more severely by the driver shortage. Instead of 1,092 drivers and the ones that we were expecting from vendor garages, only 619 have been provided. That's 473 or 43% fewer drivers than we planned for and expected. To be clear, this is not a management issue with our vendor garages, but a local reflection of the national shortage of drivers that is driven by professional drivers making different choices given the COVID-19 pandemic and or pursuing much more lucrative driving jobs. No matter what the cause, one thing is clear. This is not a short-term issue, but a long-term one that will require a fundamental change in how we provide the reliable transportation services our students and families and schools depend on. Next slide. The changing labor market has also impacted other positions. In order to address this, we have focused on several areas. One is all substitute staff, and we've added bonuses for substitute teachers, nurses, and secretaries. We are also addressing general coverage in schools due to increased absences by expanding part-time school climate staff. We are expanding the opportunities for all of those staff to go full-time, and we're designing a central office staff support deployment plan. We've also increased weekly information sessions for specific roles and ongoing recruitment at job fairs. As you know, the driver shortage has impacted the service quality of the trash collection vendor responsible for emptying school dumpsters, resulting in significant overflow at many of our schools. In addition to working with the city to ensure access to dumpsters by removing illegally parked vehicles and using our maintenance staff to temporarily relocate excess trash to additional dumpsters placed throughout the city, we have now hired 5 additional vendors who are focused on keeping areas around dumpsters clutter-free. And we're happy to report that our original trash collection vendor was back at full service capacity as of October 15th to further support our cleanup efforts. We are currently undergoing a request for proposals under our procurement process to identify additional collection vendors. Next slide, please. The reality is that our city is seeing an increase in violent activity, as indicated by Councilman Jones earlier, an increase that is causing too many people to live in fear in our own neighborhoods and too many lives to be lost. The Office of School Safety has always worked very closely with the Philadelphia Police Department, and that relationship is especially important now as we collaboratively work to address issues that are taking place outside of our schools, but still impacting students and staff who have looked at our schools as safe places. Next slide. So we have collaborated with the Philadelphia Police Department to create a school safety zone strategy that will expand police presence and support in school communities throughout the city. PPD's school safety zones will encompass 25 zones across the city, neighborhoods where 38 schools, district and charter, are located. These neighborhoods were selected based on higher incidence of violence. And I want to stress that the schools in these areas, as well as all of our schools in general, are not seeing increases in violent activity inside the buildings or on school grounds. However, there have been incidents around the community, some involving, unfortunately, our students, that make it clear that increasing the presence by law enforcement will be needed to deter criminal activity from happening. Last week, we introduced the Safe Path program with the support of $225,000 grant from the Philadelphia Commission on Crime and Delinquency, or PCCD, to staff community corridors with community members. In addition to the PCCD funds, the district has made an investment of $750,000 total over the next 3 fiscal years in ESSER funds to support the same body of work. Through this work, we will recruit and train community members to positively engage with students and school communities. In addition to the school safety zones, the Safe Path program, funded by the PCCD grant, will address 4 targeted areas. And these are communities around Lincoln High School, Motivation High School, Roxborough High School, and Sayre High School. This is work that will also involve the Philadelphia Anti-Drug, Anti-Violence Network, or PAN, a wonderful community partner. PAN will hire personnel to provide extra supervision and support for students traveling to and from, as an effort to reduce the rate of violence and conflict involving and or impacting our students. In addition to PAN today, we'll also be working with various other community groups to support this community project. Next slide, please. As an additional layer of safety, we have made the proactive decision that all students participating in interscholastic sports for the remainder of this school year will need to be fully vaccinated against COVID-19 unless they have an approved medical or religious exemption. Students planning to participate in winter sports, those are the sports of basketball, bowling, cheerleading, indoor track, swimming, and wrestling, must provide proof of being fully vaccinated by Saturday, December 18th. The requirement will also apply to students participating in spring sports, badminton, baseball, lacrosse, softball, tennis, track and field, and volleyball. Proof of vaccination for those sports must be provided by Tuesday, March 1st, 2022. Students are considered fully vaccinated 2 weeks after their second dose of COVID-19 or 2 weeks after a single dose vaccine. In the meantime, student athletes will continue to be tested 2 times a week until they provide proof of vaccination by the deadlines. Students who do not do so will be ineligible to participate in their sport until they are fully vaccinated. This decision was based on recommendations from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the Pennsylvania Interscholastic Athletic Association and the Philadelphia Department of Public Health and other sports and health organizations, stating that participation in close contact sports can put student athletes at increased risk for getting and spreading COVID-19. A vaccinated team will prevent cancellations of practices, games, and potentially whole seasons. And we want to keep our players on the courts and fields, and this is a way we believe that you can achieve that. We will expand this requirement to include students participating in performing arts, and we're working with several vaccine providers who are hosting free COVID-19 vaccine events. Those events can be found on the district's website. And now that children aged 5 through 11 are eligible for the vaccine, we are encouraging all eligible students to get the vaccine as well. Aside from the events hosted by our vaccine provider partners, students can receive the vaccine at healthcare clinics, pharmacies, and other locations throughout the city. Information can be found by visiting the City of Philadelphia's website at www.vaccines.gov. Next slide. And so as we continue to navigate this new normal of life within the pandemic, our focus continues to be on teaching and learning. As such, we are expanding our work to include virtual tutoring opportunities in core content areas for grades 6 through 12 beginning in December. More before school, and after-school programming for students. We released the RFQ in order to gain more qualified partners to support our children in before and after-school programming. And in addition, an additional 15,000 students will be served via current and new partner expansions. We've also aligned our expansion of before and after-school programming. And additional funding was provided directly to teachers to run clubs and programs for before and after school. And so as we conclude, I want to thank all of you. And if we move to the next slide, I think that's our last one. And thank you for this opportunity to share an update about the district's work. I'm happy to answer questions. I hope Reggie was able to log in again or upgrade his Microsoft Teams so that he will be available to answer questions around the environmental work. We also have quite a few other staff who can answer other questions specific to those topic areas. So, Madam Chair, I turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Height. And I will go through the names of the council members that are queued up. We're going to start a series around the questions for 5 minutes. So I want to give colleagues an opportunity to get your question in for Dr. Height. We're going to start with Councilmember Jones, then Gim and Brooks, and then queued up will be Councilmember Green, who has questions directly for Dr. Height, and Reggie McNeil, Catherine Gilmore Richardson, and Gati Air. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Councilmember Jones to begin the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Dr. Height, for your 10 years of service to the young people in our community. You know I'm a fan. I'm going to open up with that and let you know that. And I wish you the best in whatever field of endeavor you choose to go in beyond this. My question was, I want to take a deeper dive. I saw what you want to do with the Safe Corridor programs. That's what we call it in West Philadelphia. We've been doing that Monday morning roll call, 7 a.m. Member Gim managed to get up that early and join us to see our schools work together and work with the Philadelphia Police, work with Town Watch, work with SEPTA Police to try to coordinate pathways to and from school safely. But what I believe we will accomplish a safe entrance and safe departure from schools. What I'm talking about is slightly different. Sunday, we had the Will Smith Foundation across the street from Overbrook at Tustin Rec Center. And we were building a brick project where we put motivational words on a brick, and we had a number of volunteers come out. It's one young man who came over, and other people were trying to get him to engage. He kind of was there reluctantly. And I found out that his first day at Overbrook was now Monday. He had an ankle bracelet on. He was being monitored because of prior convictions. He was 17 years old. You wouldn't have known him from any of the other hundreds of students, but except for the fact that when you engaged him, it was a cloud around him. Like, I don't know why I'm here. I don't know where I'm going. So I asked him, I said, listen, I know you got in trouble. I don't have a problem with that. Boom, boom, boom. You ready to get engaged with the rest of your life? And I said, so that means you're done with that type of lifestyle. And he was brutally candid. And he said, I don't know. I'm thinking to myself, what is it that's when he walks into that school is going to engage him on a path that keeps him from damaging himself, his future, and as bad as damaging others. And so what I'm asking you is, what combination of mental health, DHS, school district counseling should he expect to guide? And when I tell you, Dr. Height, he seemed like everybody's kid. He didn't seem like he came from space looking for violence. He just seemed to have found himself in that space. And I'm wondering how we are prepared when we look at the high number of IUPs and high number of placement of young people that have that criminal background. How are we guiding them?
Councilman Jones, I appreciate the question, and I knew you were going to that specific type of example. So I wanted Kevin Bethel to come on because he can talk specifically about things that we're doing for young people now who are transitioning back into the system. And then I can share more about the social and emotional supports and the behavioral health counseling that we can provide at schools.
I'm not afraid of you, Bethel.
You never have been. So it's good to see you, sir. So one of the things we felt the same way to you, Councilman Jones. And so one of the things we started to look at is like, how can my men and women who are doing mentoring be more strategic and more focused in that space? And one of the things that was raised actually by one of my assistant directors, Lisa Sater, said, we get so many of these kids are coming back from placement and there's a gap. And so one of the things we decided to do was how could we start to fill that gap? So we started a demonstration model up at Martin Luther King High School where we're working with Dr. Deanna Bonds out at Karen's Lynch's shop, support services, who are doing the transition work with our kids coming back from placement. And so we actually put a school safety officer working specifically with those kids coming back from placement, mentoring them directly on a day-to-day basis and building a relationship with them to help that navigate that process. See, because what we would find is when they weren't, there was issues going on in school, a lot of them were just getting in trouble, fighting, and then ultimately wound up violating or dropping out. And so we started at the beginning of the school year. We're actually now going to move into the JJSC and supporting Dr. Ramsey in the school that's there. They're saying let's move up even further upstream and start capturing those kids while they're in that space as well. And also as they move into some of our core neighborhoods, as you know, Overbrook, Edison, MLK, Bartram, many of our neighborhood schools get a large percentage of those kids coming back from placement. And so we're trying to I just actually met with the support team today about how we can even further align our work as they have the STEP program and other activity in the juvenile center, how we can really align our work and compare and working with Dr. Bonds as we transition those kids. So there's soft hands-offs, continue through that process. And so we're excited about where that's going, and we're hoping to expand that model because we're seeing early great results. The officer who's working with the kids is really building a great relationship with those young people. And so we're excited about that. And then I also would share, I know earlier in your conversation, you talked about the school to prison pipeline. And one of the things, as you know, in 2014, when I was in the police department, we started the school diversion program. Through that process, even now, working with the Philadelphia Police Department, they moved the actual school diversion officers into my office at 440. And so now we divert children on a daily basis, and my school safety officers are diverting as well. We understand the strains on the police department, so we have an amazing relationship. In 2013-14 school year, we had almost 1,600 kids arrested. Our last full school year, we had 254. And so we've dropped almost 84% in our school-based arrests. And then the recidivism rate for those young people is only 27% after 2 years, and 73% of them are staying out of trouble 2 years later. So when you talk about that school to prison pipeline, you're getting that 11th grader and 10th grader who are getting through school and not getting arrested and not falling into that process. And that's a relationship with Department of Human Services. DHS has been a phenomenal partner in providing the CUAs to service those young people. We've diverted almost 2,400 students over this period of time. Drexel University has been researching the model and it's going extremely well, nationally recognized now. And the Philadelphia Police Department has been an amazing partner because at the end of the day, they actually do the diversion, but we support them 100%. So we really have moved away from criminalizing our kids. We do make some arrests, but those are upstream, assaults and behavior that's outside the scope of our diversion. But we have a great relationship with the DA's office and their juvenile team as well. And we have we're collaborating daily basis as to make sure we don't put anyone in the system and keep as many kids out of the system as possible.
I appreciate that response, and that is what I'm looking for, that type of engagement that, can prevent as opposed to respond to acts of violence in our schools. And when I tell you I'm appreciative of Kevin Bethel's work. I remember sharing the Criminal Justice Reform Committee chairmanship with him, where he had a 15-minute rant about overcriminalization of some juvenile offenders. And it changed DHS's policy within that 15 minutes. So if you're telling me we're on our way, then that gives me some degree of confidence about the direction the school district, but I'm still not scared of you, Bethel.
Councilmember Jones, I didn't know if you wanted Dr. Height to have anything, but the bell did ring. I wanted you to end the conversation before we moved on.
I was going to say Kevin answered all of he included things I was going to include, but he hit all of the points. And those meetings that you started on Monday morning, Councilman Jones, we are now doing those and engaging schools in those with now Deputy Commissioner Dale as well. And so I think Councilwoman Gim has been a part of some of those meetings as well as yourself, and we are those have been happening weekly now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember Jones. The chair recognizes Councilmember Gim and then cues up Councilmember Brooks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. My colleagues, my colleague Councilmember Jones, for inviting me to that meeting. It was a big eye opener and important more than ever to really zero in. Superintendent Height, I think our focus on what was happening in our schools and to our communities really started a little more than a year ago with a conversation that you and I had about the impact and concentrated impact of gun violence on young people. And one of the things that I think got exposed very clearly in that conversation is that particularly for young people, and what we're seeing across the city is that gun violence is relational. And thus, the reaction and the solutions that we bring to the table has to tackle some of that relational aspect of it in order to break cycles of violence or the, some of the back and forth that's been going on. And so that's partly why a lot of my questions relate back to resources within schools. I think they relate back to Councilmember Jones. In particular, I think I wanted to talk a little bit about the issue of truancy and re-engagement. And I want to be careful because I think truancy has had a certain kind of approach and style. But, what I'm interested in is not to kind of look at who's doing wrong, but what is our re-engagement strategy for bringing back young people, especially after 16 months, especially young people who are concentrated in some schools that have been deeply harmed by not just violence, but the damage that it does to young people's relationships with one another, to their relationships within school communities, and to their relationship to the broader world. We would like to see if you could share with the Education Committee the current, I guess I would say the truancy rate for the district and how that compares to pre-pandemic. And I think partly what we're interested in is not like seeking problems, but trying to identify areas where we need to concentrate a re-engagement strategy. So is that something that you can provide, and do you actually have those numbers?
I believe I have those numbers. And if I don't, Councilwoman Gim, we can provide those. And so I was trying to look that up right now. Let me get those to you, and I'll be able to provide those right as before we conclude this. I just need to find them on.
That would be helpful. Thank you. Yeah, and usually we talk about attendance rates, but this is about the numbers of students who are missing more than 10 days of school already, or are on a track too. And then I think one of the things that we want to talk about, and this relates back to Chief Bethel's tremendous work about getting school safety zones, but more importantly, we've been talking about the Safe Corridors program. I'm going to be a relentless cheerleader, supporter, and accountability manager for staffing all of our school crossing guards. That is an important issue. But what has changed with the district in terms of engagement, getting out into communities, working with other agencies to engage young people who are currently disconnected?
Thank you. And thanks for the question. And so I'm going to go back to the other question first because I have been able to find the information. So the percentage of students attending 95% of school days or more through October is now 55.7%. Last year at the same time, that number was 65% of students were attending 95% of the time at this portion of the year. So we are slightly down from where we have been in the past. And then we have we have this information available by school on our profiles page. And so, and I'll be able to send to council members, at least to the education committee, all of the links to get that information. So
go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So then you talked about working with other agencies, and one of the things that Kevin Bethel just described was, as we think about these groups that are working with young people in communities, because as you know, we are trying to focus on ensuring that there's safety in and around schools, but also taking advantage of partnerships and individuals who are already doing very good work with young people, either as mentors or either as places for those individuals to go, whether they be after-school programs or school sites where those individuals could be occupied in some form or fashion. But all of those things are part of the work that we are attempting to do. And as a result of the RFQ that we sent out, we've now identified significant number of providers that are in communities that could also provide support for our young people. Additionally, we're working and will continue to work with all of the social service agencies so that we are not just identifying those specific students that are now back in schools and may not be attending, but also to continue to identify those who, for whatever reason, didn't show up or haven't shown up yet this year, to make sure that if those young people are still in and around the city of Philadelphia, we can get them re-engaged in schools.
And I think, the key is that, I'll do this on the second go around, but we're really asking about how we can reach the students who are not currently in schools, the ones who are disengaged right now, and what the response is in order not to and I think we all understand this, not to be punitive, not to go after them. We need to bring them back into the fold. They were attending at one point. They have not. And so the strategy of re-engagement, it's one of the reasons why I'll ask a little bit later about the expansion of the STEP program. I recognize that, we have IBHS. We'll talk about that as well. But we are hearing from principals and families on the ground about the urgent need for direct mental health support, trauma support services in schools with people who are there on a regular basis, familiar to and supportive of young people. And, the STEP program is extraordinarily popular. We're just trying to figure out a way to get some of that support with the intent of re-engaging, reaching young people, and making sure that any approach around truancy is fundamentally about re-engagement of disengaged youth right now, and not about, chasing them down, identifying them, marking them, putting labels. But we've got to bring them back into the fold. And I'm still waiting to hear what the actual strategy can be and how the city needs to be your partner in helping that.
Indeed, and I'm happy to say we have now identified and re-engaged some 5,000 students and who were previously not engaged. And so we have been able to re-engage. And that was through a variety of things you just described, like identifying other barriers, home visits in some cases, working with those other agencies, having directing additional behavior health support to schools that are more impacted or more likely to be impacted. But I think if we get to your second round of questions, Karen Lynch is also on, so she can also give some specific examples of things that I'm sure I left off.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Ginn. Councilmember Brooks, and then I'm going to queue up Councilmember O.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question, I think this first one's for Dr. Height, maybe. I'm talking about the Dorn Safe, the platform to organize the environmental reports. My question is my understanding that this platform was meant to be up and running months ago. What is the current status, and when do we expect to launch it? And why has there been a delay?
Thanks, Councilwoman Brooks, for your question. I'm going to ask Reggie McNeil because he is intimately related to the DunSafe app. Reggie.
Yeah, good afternoon, and I hope you can hear me. Sorry for the technical difficulties that I was experiencing earlier. So for DunSafe, it is up and running right now. We have a module called a HERA inspection module that we're going through at this point. It is not public facing yet. We are planning out what the dashboard is going to be for the public facing document. But for right now, we have started the work and going into schools and doing our HERA surveillance inspections and loading that information into that platform. So it is active.
It is active. It's just not public facing as of yet.
Not yet.
Do you have any day? Like, is it a month or maybe 2 weeks?
So I would say by the end of this year, that's our goal, to try and get a public facing dashboard out for everyone to view the documents that we've uploaded, some of the documents that we've uploaded as it relates to our HERA management plan and to DunSafe.
Okay. Thank you so much. My next question is about vacancies. This is something, Dr. Height, you mentioned a little bit during your testimony. And I could also send this over in writing. But can you please provide me with the current number of vacancies for, I have a list of positionings. And if you don't know it right offhand, I'll take it another way. I'm concerned about paraprofessionals, the nurses, the BCAs, the teachers, counselors, administrators, and bus drivers. I think you mentioned bus drivers in your testimony, but there are other positions in schools that are still short-staffed.
Yes, I'll be glad to. So I do have some numbers on those. And we, as you know, Councilwoman Brooks, we do a quarterly report that is going to be released this Friday. And that report shows 1,869 vacancies across all schools and across all roles, right? And so it also includes current and future dated vacancies over the course of the year that we already know of. And so if someone has said they will be leaving at the end of December, then those numbers are also counted as a part of this. And so so for instance, there are 257 teacher vacancies currently. 220 of them were current vacancies already that we knew of, that were either hires where we were not able to hire individuals in those roles. And then 37 of those we know will occur in the future. And so the teacher vacancy, the teacher fill rate is currently at 97.1%. We have 21 nurse vacancies, and then that current rate is at 91% fill rate. There are 3 secretary vacancies. The student climate staff is one of the largest areas where we need additional staff, and that was one reason we wanted to take those from a part-time to offer for individuals working in that union full-time for this year. And so there are 202 vacancies of student climate staff, or fill rate of 81%. Special education assistants or the paraprofessionals, 205 vacancies, 91%. Bus chauffeurs, 86 or 72%. And general cleaners, 59 general cleaning, or it's a 92% fill rate. Those are the numbers I have, and we can, I can provide you with more information about what we're doing to address many of the vacancies I just described.
One of the things you mentioned and what I've heard is that people applying for the jobs is taking longer to hear back from the district. So what is the average turnaround for the district to reach out once the application is received? And is the district calling folks back to acknowledge the receipt of the application and talking them through next steps and timelines?
I think that's an excellent question, Councilwoman Brooks, and I don't have the direct answer to that, but I think Larissa Shambo, who is our chief of talent, is also on. Some of my staff colleagues are having difficulty unmuting themselves, but if Larissa is on, I'd love for her to provide a response for that. Oh, there she is. Yeah.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Councilwoman. To answer your question, there has been or there were delays with the sheer number of additional staff that we were hiring at the beginning of the year, that it was taking longer in August and in September for bringing people on board. I equate it similar to the boats that are floating off of the coast of Long Beach waiting to dock. There's just things that were ripple effects of not hiring individuals for a long period of time when our buildings were closed, so that when they reopened, there were delays at the initial part of the school year. We've made some changes to our process to ensure that those delays have been lessened. So we are now hosting sessions for individuals in a different way. Some of the roles, we started to host more sessions on site so that we can more easily work through the technological issues for certain roles. We're also holding office hours for individuals to come in where it takes about 30 minutes for them to walk through online every component of their process. So I think there's some parts of our process itself that have changed, but I think we're also seeing people starting to work through the pathway much more quickly. So if you look just at teachers right now, I believe there's about 28 teachers that are going through our onboarding process right now, and 24 of them have been onboarding for less than 6 days. So there's really only a small number of teachers that are more than 6 days in the queue of the process. We are looking at trying to reduce those numbers for other fill rates as well, for student climate staff, bus drivers, other things through our information sessions, which are then combined with our onboarding sessions. So we've definitely seen an increase in the turnaround time and looked to increase it even further for some of our school-based staff roles now.
Thank you for that, because I just want to make sure that we're doing everything that we can in terms of recruitment, especially around student climate staff. We know that several of the communities that, are having huge issues with problems that are feeding into schools. And I just want to make sure that adequate staff is in place to support the shortage in general, but also to make sure we're supporting our students every day. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And let me just add to that, because I know Dr. Haidt mentioned there's 202 climate staff and they became full-time positions. Can you speak to what the salary is of those climate staff, because they're so critical at schools? What is the rate? I know you said they went from part-time to full-time. So what does that make that?
Larissa?
So I can get the full rate for what they're moving to, but they the added benefit for that is also that they would have access to benefits. So we have 3 and 4 hour staff positions that we are now in the midst of. It has not been completed yet, offering to any of those individuals, if you would like to move yourself from a 3 hour a day to a 6 hour a day, that would obviously increase your rate, but also have you access benefits. So we're happy to get you the rate from what they go from 3 hour to 6 hour, but also want to emphasize the power of offering benefits.
Well, thank you. And we thank you for again, that's a critical position in school-based. And so we thank you for agreeing to extend that. Thank you, Councilmember Brooks. So Councilmember O is next, and we're going to queue up Councilmember Green. And then after that, Gilmer, Richardson, and Gautier. If no one else has the first round, I'll start taking cues for the second round. Thank you. Councilmember O.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman. Dr. Haidt, again, can you clarify the change in admission criteria or selection criteria for special admit schools or criteria-based schools? Is that all the schools, or is that just 5 schools? What exactly is that?
Thank you, Councilman O, for the question. And then I think Karen Lynch is on now, and I wanted to make sure we give you as the most accurate information we have on this. So she is unmuting now and can respond specifically to your question. Karen.
Thank you, Dr. Height and Council Member O. For the record, I'm Karen Lynch, Chief of Student Support Services. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent, thank you. So of our 215 schools, 21 are criteria-based, or what you are referring to as special admit. We have 17 citywide schools. One of the 17 is Widener, and that's a school where you cannot apply to enter that school. You have, you're referred to that school. There are 5 of our 21 schools are this year for the first time. 4 of the 5 are using a writing sample. Parkway Center City, one of the 5, has used a writing sample for the last few years. And you know that this is the school that admits students to receive the dual degree at the community college. So that writing sample was very instrumental in helping to identify and select students who were prepared to engage in a college curriculum. So I say all of that to highlight that the writing sample is not new to the school district. It's an online sample that has been used several times, for several years in the past by one of the 5 schools. The criteria-based schools, as in the past, are using attendance and grades as criteria for admission consideration. Our citywide schools do not have criteria, and I think we eliminated the criteria for those schools several years ago. And lastly, all of our schools, with few exceptions, are going to use a lottery process for a selection of students, which means that qualified students who meet the criteria, their names, their applications will be placed into a lottery system that is conducted digitally. I think I have captured everything.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask Dr. Height or whoever you would have answer this question? Why is that a better process? In other words, I know that, for example, for most of the charter schools, that's lottery based. People have to basically hit a lottery in order to get to one of these charter schools. And we have criteria-based schools, and I believe we have people who look over a number of things, from GPA to standardized tests to essays and letters of recommendation. It sounds as though, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that now for these criteria-based schools, there will not be necessarily the highest GPA or the best score on a PSSA or the best essay or the recommendation. It'll be that if you're qualified, you will go to a lottery system, and then depending on what zip code you're in, it'll be weighted higher depending on which zip code you're in. That's my understanding. I don't know if that's accurate.
Yeah, so I'll start and then have Karen finish, Councilman O. And so the reason we looked at this was it goes back to a Pew study from several years ago that indicated that there were certain areas of the city where young people, for whatever reason, did not have access to these types of programs, although they qualified for the programs. Additionally, we saw from that same Pew study that there were also children in some of these communities that qualified but then chose, for whatever reason, not to apply to those schools. Instead, they may have gone to their neighborhood high school or to a charter school or to some other program. And so when we talked about the diversity, equity, and inclusion work and created a framework and a lens. And when we applied that lens, when it was applied to like this process, it showed that there were essentially several areas in the city that that guaranteed placement into this program, and then other areas of the city where there was almost no access to the criteria-based schools, although there were qualified individuals living in those areas. And so that's why we chose to change the process. I will add that we would normally be using the PSSA, but because students didn't take the PSSA, so it was hit and miss for the last 2 years, because first we were virtual, then we were hybrid. You couldn't take it unless you were in person. So you couldn't apply it to every student who enrolled. And so without that, we just could not use the PSSA as a fair measure of where children were, because there were lots of children who did not take it for a variety of reasons. I'll ask Karen to fill in any of the other things I left. Oh, and then I will just add one other point, that when it was done school by school, it became it became very subjective, and very subjective based on like whomever was the team at the school who was creating the process. And so waiting lists were handled differently. Some people would do waiting lists based on alphabet. Others would do waiting lists based on numerical factors. Others would do waiting lists based on interviews. And so all of those things were different depending on the different school. And we thought that it was really important to have one system that applied to all of the schools using this process. And I'll ask Karen to add in now anything I missed.
Well, the bell has rung, so I'm out of time. I will just say, if you would think about this, I mean, why not put those programs into those neighborhoods? In other words, it appears to me that we're talking about bright kids who have a need for better programming in their neighborhood schools, or to have a charter school or a public school that expands, rather than to take this process and go. I find a lottery thing a troublesome thing, but I it's unfair for me to ask you without you giving me a chance to answer. But if you think about that, I'll wait to the next round. Thank you, Chairwoman.
Thank you, Council Member O. The chair recognizes Council Member Green, and want to remind folks that he had questions for Dr. Height and Mr. McNeil, and then cues Catherine Gilmore Richardson and Council Member Gautier. Council Member Green?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm not going to go back and forth through some of the correspondence that have been provided, both to Dr. Height and also from other organizations regarding the asbestos and mold issues. But one of the things I've shared, and I've had this conversation, I believe with you, Dr. Height, but more recently with Mr. McNeil, about the fact that in reference to the school district, and I'm talking about this issue from a personal perspective, not only as a policymaker in the city of Philadelphia, an elected official, but more personally as a parent with a child in the school district that dealt with asbestos at his son's school, and as the son of a retired school teacher who dealt with asbestos at her school when she was a teacher. Quite simply, the constituents in the city of Philadelphia have lost trust in reference to the school district's ability to address asbestos and mold in the city of Philadelphia. And so I say that based on the fact that we had a hearing last Friday, and I thought that would be an opportunity for the district to try to demonstrate some of the things they were taking and doing to address the issues of asbestos and mold. And as opposed to testifying, the district decided to provide written testimony. Can you explain why the district chose not to testify in person and just provide written testimony?
I will add, Councilman Green, that the rationale for the written testimony was that there was other work that was critical to the district on that day that needed to occur. and that because it fell on that Friday, we were unable to participate, and that's why the written testimony. That's why the written testimony was provided as opposed to individuals showing up in person. And quite frankly, I could have shown up, but I would not have been able to answer a lot of the questions, and didn't think that that would have been helpful or beneficial to anyone if in fact I was there, but then was not able to answer any questions. But other staff members were engaged in other very critically important work on Friday, and that's why there was the written testimony provided instead.
And I'm in the process of trying to review what was provided today and also what was provided Friday. It does seem like there's additional information that was provided for today's hearing that was not part of the testimony for Friday. But I hear your point, and I also want to thank you for the work you've done in leading the school district and trying to change the culture of the school district. I think when you first came in, you were very upfront and honest in reference to the situation this district was in regarding finances and trying to provide that level of transparency. But from my perspective, what I've seen is a really retreatment from that. And this is something not indicative of you or others in the school district. It's really more of the district as a whole, the culture of the school district. It takes a perspective of, we will let you know what we think you need to know, and we'll do it when we feel you should have it, as opposed to being honest and upfront and saying, listen, we have a number of school buildings, I believe 226 school buildings, a number of them, I guess 60 or 70, have significant asbestos issues. And it's an issue that's not going to change because school buildings are, the average school building, I believe, is close to 80 years old. And so that has led to a lot of the challenges and the mistrust and the need for the legislation that was introduced and passed out of committee, because there needs to be another entity beyond just a school district that can allow both parents like myself, teachers like my mother, and others that work in the school buildings to feel safe that these issues are being addressed. And so I think it's just unfortunate that we're at this situation, but it's a situation where we need to have the city take a more active role in addressing these issues. I know resources have been a challenge. I know the pandemic has also been a challenge, and you've been dealing with a lot of issues in trying to get parents to provide the ability for their children to be back in school. The fact that we've had less than 1% positivity rate for COVID infections is phenomenal considering all the challenges. But at the same time, constituents are saying that the schools have been closed for a number of months. From conversations we've had, we're getting the perspective that asbestos issues are being worked on. But then when we come back to school on August 31st, we have major asbestos issues at Masterman, SLA, Bieber, and other schools.
Yeah, so Councilman, thank you. Thank you for your comments and the questions on that. And I'll just add, and I think that this is one thing that's really important. And you're right about the trust stuff, and we're working to, as best we can, to put out the information that we are able to put out there. That's why Done Safe and that process is also critically important. But it's our responsibility to meet regulatory requirements around all of these environmental things. And the district has been hyper-focused on the regulatory parts of that work. And I know I see Reggie is also on, and just like if you want to speak to the asbestos at, as the councilman was referring, at Masterman, at SLA, Bieber, I'll have you do that, Councilman, if you're looking for a response to that.
Well, no, this is just more because I've gotten through a lot of these kind of conversations, and I understand the regulations, and I've gotten a lot more of a perspective of the regulations and the back and forth of what is considered best practices, some of which, from my understanding, was agreed to by the district saying we didn't agree to it, so the difference of opinion. But the bottom line is that citizens just don't have that trust in the school district, and it's something that we need to have the city take a role in, because ultimately the city of Philadelphia is the entity both through license inspection and the health department are responsible for making sure and providing certificates of occupancy for individuals to be in buildings, regardless if they are school buildings or other buildings in the city. And that's a role that the city in the past has not played a specific role in by issuing a special certificate of occupancy for education buildings, but really deferring that to the district. But going forward, we just can't take that position because of what has happened historically over the years. And this is not a new issue. This is a systemic issue with the district in reference to the culture of just not providing information in a real transparent way.
No, I do appreciate that, Councilman. And the only thing I'll add on this issue is that, so I mean, to your point, and I agree with the trust thing, and we have to get a lot better at how we communicate the work that we're doing. But I do want to add, we have done a lot of work in this area. And my concern, my natural concern with, if in fact this is something that then it becomes the responsibility of the city, I think it could be harder for individuals to get information about what's happening in and around, particularly as it relates to school buildings. And so that's just a concern, just as I listened to what you just described. But I just thought it was important for me also to share my perspective on that.
And I appreciate that, but it's something we keep hearing over and over and over again, not just in this administration, previous school administrations, about the need to do better with trust and provide that information. But when you say you concern it may get harder, it can't get harder than no information. And so that's really the crux of the issue, that we're not getting the information that's discernible for parents, students, or those who work in our school buildings about the condition of the buildings. And unfortunately, we go through the situation over and over again. When the issue comes up, there's a quick response just to get it off of, I guess, the media cycle. But the issue is still not resolved and continues to be in its perspective, because this is legislation that I was actually going to do a couple of years ago. I pulled back to give the district an opportunity to address these issues, which they stated they were doing. And, work has been ongoing, but it's not a perspective that, people really have a full flavor and perspective in reference to what's being accomplished. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Council Member. Appreciate it. I'm going to queue up Council Member Catherine Gilmore Richardson, and then Councilman Gautier, and then for a second round, I have Council Member Brooks and Council Member Catherine Gilmore Richardson. Let me proceed with Councilmember Gautier, and I'll cue back up to Councilmember Catherine Richardson.
Hi, thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening, Dr. Height. I wanted to thank the school district for the steps that it's taken to bring equity to the high school selection process. I think it's really important that, our kids all have access to a quality education and safe environments, and that we go about the work of removing barriers that have had negative impacts on low-income students of color. And so I applaud us for the way that we're moving forward. I did, however, have just some questions about how we're doing that, and have also been asked some questions by constituents. And so I wanted to talk about that a little bit more. Can you further elaborate on the process behind choosing the 6 underrepresented zip codes for this year's admission process? Because there are whole parts of our city where many Black and Brown residents live that are not in those preference zip codes. So I wanted to hear a little bit more about that.
Thank you, Councilwoman. And I know Karen was on, and I think she can still unmute. And so I'm going to ask her to respond. And if she can't respond, then we also have our Chief of Evaluation and Research, whose group did that analysis and provided those recommendations.
Hi, Dr. Height. Thank you. And thank you for the question. So I think very, very quickly, our research and evaluation team looked at previous year's experience in 4 of the schools where zip codes will be used in this year. And they looked at the 6 lowest. We looked at the 12 lowest, we looked at the 6 lowest, we looked at the 4 lowest contributed community zip codes where students have come from to attend these schools. And so these are the very lowest zip codes that had representation, if that's clear enough.
I do understand that. However, zip codes are pretty broad designations, and there are a lot of neighborhood disparities within zip codes. So in 19143, for example, which is not included, you have Cobbs Creek, and then you have Cedar Park. One is a neighborhood that has, high levels of income. The population is whiter, and one is a working class Black neighborhood. So how are you determining, where those students are coming from? And have we considered using census tracts, which would be a much smaller way of defining a geography? And I can give you other examples. In 19104, we have Mantua, which are going to include a lot of low-income Black students, but we also have Powelton Village, which is a completely different neighborhood and has a completely different demographic makeup. How are we accounting for those broad disparities that can exist within zip codes?
So zip codes were selected because legal research also confirmed that case law has supported the use of zip codes. And so that's one of the reasons why we considered zip codes. And zip codes are intended to include and to account for a variety of demographic issues and concerns. But when we looked at legally what has been sustained in court and asked several for research and consideration, it was zip codes that we were advised would be the strongest way to move forward.
If we can't say as a city that we're saying, the overrepresentation of certain zip codes don't relate to neighborhoods in those zip codes, which are higher income and whiter, then I think we need to take a look at that. I would want us to be able to answer that question pretty declaratively before we leave out zip codes that have high numbers of working class, low income, Black and brown folks. So that's my concern.
And just as the last point, I would share with you that a reliance on race in a determination for the selection process, we were strongly advised legally that would not be something that we should do. And so that would be what we did not do.
I understand. I assume we have goals. We're doing this because we want equity and we want the makeup for some of these schools to look more like our city. The only thing I'm cautioning us against is that we have the right process to get there. So and I would love to maybe have a further discussion with that after this hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gautier. I just have a question as it relates to that. Is income a legal criteria that is excluded also? If race is, I know everybody's touchy about race, although we shouldn't be given all the conversations we haven't in the last year, but can income be a weighted formula so that we're providing access to people that traditionally don't have access? Karen?
I'm not familiar, Councilwoman, with any jurisdictions that have used income specifically. I am familiar with the use of, say, for example, free and reduced lunch as a criteria that can be used. I would share with all that this is our starting point this year. There are so many more issues related to school selection, equity, and equal access. For example, we did not even touch sibling preference, which is yet another opportunity for inequity. There's more that we have to do, and so this is our starting point, and we're moving forward from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you. The chair recognizes Councilmember Catherine Gilmore Richardson. Did you log back on for the first round? If not, then I will move to Councilmember Brooks for the second round. Thank you. I'm going to ask that we do the second round for 3 minutes. We do still have to go into a public meeting, a public hearing, and provide an opportunity for the public to testify. There's several people that have signed on to apply. If our technical staff could begin to queue up some of those folks, that would be very helpful in getting us moving through this hearing. So, Councilmember Brooks?
Yep, I'm here. I'll try to keep it brief and quick. Dr. Height, you mentioned earlier in your testimony that you were in a conversation with Amazon around logistic training centers with the goal of having CTE training in neighborhood schools. I'm concerned, like given like Amazon's treatment of workers in the past, can you explain where you are in this process and if the public will be provided with the opportunity to weigh in on these discussions?
Yeah, so really early in the conversation, Councilwoman Brooks, and so this is not a baked out plan yet, but really working to understand what opportunities will exist for our young people to be trained so that if they chose to pursue a career or job there, they would have the appropriate training in order to do so.
Okay, so basically, since it hasn't been baked out, it's time for, there's time available to kind of talk through some of the concerns with Amazon as a whole, as a provider of services. My next question is about the mask mandate. You know, Governor Wolf just recently stated that he was removing the state's mandate in January. What is the district's position on the mask mandate, and what are we planning to do for the spring?
Yeah, we until we have a lot more students receiving the vaccine and quite frankly, a lot more employees, although we're at almost 82% of our employees vaccinated, we still plan to have a mask mandate. Now, if you recall, we had a mask mandate here in Philadelphia before the governor created a mandate for the rest of the Commonwealth. And so we will continue with the mask mandate until advised by PDPH or the CDC otherwise.
Okay, and my last question is about back to this teacher hiring. I know we've been doing a huge push around hiring teachers, but I know from my personal experience from talking to the educators in my life that, you know, teachers and school staff are exhausted. Like this year has been challenging time in the classroom, and I'm constantly hearing more and more teachers planning to leave the profession. Like, what is the district doing to acknowledge these changes and support teachers, staff, and students? And what changes has the district made to address this issue?
Yeah, so we actually are fully aware of that, Councilwoman Brooks, and we're seeing this in districts across the country where individuals are, after a year of hybrid and virtual and then coming back now with like all of the things that we're asking educators to do. So just as we focused on the social and emotional aspects of our young people, we also have another path or another set of strategies that we're doing with adults. And quite frankly, we're just trying to take those things off of their plates that historically we've asked them to do along with everything else. And that's not to say that that's going to make matters a lot easier, but by the same token, it's the acknowledgement that everyone is working so much harder. And so we try to do things like not level down, for instance. We're also have a deployment plan to get staff members to those schools that have high vacancy rates and high attendance absences, and so that they get additional support. But it's those types of things that we think are critically important to supporting educators as they do this work.
That's
And we
nice.
thought the contract was helpful too. So getting the contract done naturally was a huge priority for us.
Thank you so much, Dr. Height.
Thank you, Councilmember Brooks. The chair is going to recognize Councilmember O, and then Councilmember Catherine Gilmore Richardson is on to do her first cue. Councilmember O, 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman. So getting back to that question about why is one better than the other, I just note that Carver Engineering is 93% minority, 65% Black. It's Columbo's 88% minority, 43% Black. Parkway is 98% minority, 71% Black. Girls High is 96% minority, 66% Black. Bodine is 90% minority, 52% Black. Central High School, 73% minority, Masterman, 60% minority. However, at Central, African-American students make up 20%, and at Masterman, African-American students make up 15%. So there seems to be two schools where African-American students do not represent the largest group of minorities. However, in all the other schools that I mentioned and schools beside them, the largest population in these magnet schools are African-American. So changing the process, is that for all schools or just these schools? And what is the goal when, in other words, you're not dealing with one or two schools, you're dealing with a process. And again, my concern is really this, that it's not the student who gets the highest GPA or in other words, it sounds like, you could correct me if I'm wrong, that there is a criteria from which then it's a lottery. And the lottery is the thing that concerns me. In other words, and let me say that I've been contacted by parents of students, African-American students, who said, my child worked hard and they earned their way, and we want them to be judged on criteria, not that they're going to be put into a lottery system. The lottery system is where there's an issue. And that's what I'm trying to understand. Why is the lottery better than the merits of the individual?
And Councilman, I'm going to ask Karen to respond, but I'll just say before she comes on, in that you still have to meet the criteria. So the lottery just doesn't mean it's a free for all for everyone. They still have to meet the criteria for that particular school. But Karen, I'll let you respond to the councilman's question.
Yeah,
Thank you, Dr. Hutton.
Let me respond to that clarification, and I know I'm running out of time. There is criteria, and sometimes you don't get enough applicants, and people have trouble making that criteria. Sometimes there's criteria, and you have so many applicants that they choose the best among all that meet the criteria, as it will be done in college, as it will be done in grad school, as it will be done when people apply to a profession like medicine or art or business. It's just a criteria that you try to select the best among those who meet the minimum criteria. And so the lottery seems very arbitrary, like people meet the minimum criteria and then it's a lottery, which is kind of what we already have with charter schools, a lottery. I'm sorry, I've run out of time.
Councilmember, please finish this, because this will be the last round for council members after.
I know Dr. Lynch is going to respond.
Please finish your thought.
Thank you. So I finished the thought and wait for the answer.
Thank you. That would be Karen Lynch. Councilman, several things. One, we changed the process because one of the things that we heard, and we received a good deal of input, we had public hearings, public forums, we heard from people by way of a survey. We heard from people from a variety of different communities, cultures across our city, people who spoke different languages. We did a lot of community outreach. We looked at the research to see which students were admitted to schools. And one of the things that was clear, particularly for the schools that you are talking about, the 4 or 5 schools that you're mentioning, students were coming from specific schools in much greater numbers, where there were students who were very well qualified. They met the criteria. and they were not. And they were in schools that were underrepresented, attending schools that were underrepresented, and coming from communities where they resided, where they were underrepresented. In the past, a C was included as part of the grades for schools that you're talking about. The C has been removed. So when you say a reduction in the students that the criteria for the students, the standards are still high. You have to meet the standards in order to be included in the lottery process. So there's not a reduction there. There's an increase in access, and that's what this is all about. And there is an increase in objectivity. There's a reduction in human involvement. So you're using grades, you're using attendance, and you're using the score on an online writing sample that doesn't involve humans scoring that test. So it's much greater objectivity and much greater access. Thank you, Chairwoman, for the opportunity to respond. Thank you, Councilman O.
Yeah, thank you. The online grading of an essay or writing sample. So someone is from a part of our city where their parents are bilingual or they don't speak English. And so they write an essay, a moving, wonderful essay, overcoming hardships. Maybe they're immigrants. Maybe they grew up in a certain section of our city where people speak another language. And how they grade by the computer? Is that grammar? Like, in other words, where's the meaning being evaluated as opposed to their lack of exposure to English?
Very quickly, because I know we're out of time, and I see the look. The prompts, if you will, or the question that's given, it's not an open, you can't write on any topic you'd like to write on. You have to write on the topic that you have been given. There is a scoring system online that scores the test. And there are accommodations that are given for students that have certain disabilities, and for ELL students, for example. There's the opportunity to use a word-to-word, not with definition, dictionary. And so these are accommodations that are used when taking the PSSA and or Keystones. And so these are the same accommodations that we're applying in this instance.
Right. Thank you, Chairwoman. Thank you, Dr. Lynch. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you,
Hyde.
Councilman O. The chair is going to recognize Councilmember Catherine Gilmore Richardson, and since she didn't get a first round, she'll get 5 minutes on this last questioning as we queue up for the public testimony. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you for the flexibility. I'm actually a busy working mom, picking up 3 children from 3 different public schools. So I thank you for the flexibility. But at any rate, I wanted to start by thanking you, Dr. Height, for your service and tenure with the school district and for working closely with my office since my time as a member of Philadelphia City Council. And due to time constraints, I wanted to get several questions on the record so that we could get updates on a few matters that I know we've worked on over the past 20 months. So the first I'll start with is conflict resolution. I know this school year was the first school year that conflict resolution was to be instituted at the tier 1 level for every child in every school. So I would like an update on that, because I did hear when I was out at a community function from an administrator that, on the ground implementation of conflict resolution programming in the schools, may be lacking. And so I just wanted to get some clarity there and an update on that process. And then secondly, I wanted to circle back to, and I know you all talked about this earlier, and I think between you, CP, and Councilmember Jones, it mentioned this about the career and technical education programs in the city. And we were recently together at Frankfurt High School to announce the nation's first solar CTE program. But also we were together down at the shipyard regarding the exciting opportunities that exist with the partnership with the Department of Navy and all the other partners. So I just wanted you to also give an update on the CTE programs the new CTE programs that are being implemented and those that are in the pipeline for approval through the Pennsylvania Department of Education. And then finally, I wanted to mention, because I've heard from several teachers and folks that I work with that they are very concerned about the policy regarding their communication ability with the media. And I just wanted to get that on the record. And I know that was addressed earlier in the hearing, but I had to get that on the record. I think that was from the board. So we can start with those two questions and we'll go from there.
Thanks, Councilwoman, and thanks to you and Councilwoman Kiona Sanchez for being at Frankfurt. I'll start with the conflict resolution, and I'll ask Karen Lynch to rejoin, to describe how the work that's going and the challenges that we may be running into at schools for that.
Thank you, Dr. Haidt. So, Councilwoman, you know that we are very much committed to the implementation of this initiative and the work of conflict resolution across our school district. It takes various forms, as we have shared with you in the past. One of the things that you know that we've brought up this year in greater numbers in schools is the community meeting. And as well, you know, we have the opportunity for all of our children. And I do believe that you expressed that you actually had the experience of observing your kindergartner in a community meeting session where she spoke to her feelings and her emotions as she introduced herself to the class. So we know that it is working in many, many places. We have coaches and district staff that are deployed to ensure that any issues that school leaders or school-based staff are having with implementation are addressed. We also have videos, and we have steppers, and we have ways to ensure that all are getting great examples. I think we also shared with you that in each of our school improvement plans, there is a climate focus that schools have signed off on, and that's a way for us to not just monitor, but also collect data and look at opportunities for accountability. And we're looking as well at other secondary ways to monitor, for example, how many referrals are made from staff or from the office within a school, or how often are there issues that are taking place in the school that are raising conflict and how to address them. Kevin Bethel earlier talked about some of the conflict resolution efforts that are underway in schools. I just want to highlight a couple of others in addition to the restorative practices. Our Relationships First is moving forward. Our youth court is moving forward. And so as you raise initiatives, there are opportunities, there are places where it's going to work extremely well. There are places where it needs to be improved, and that's what we're about the process of determining. Thank you, Dr. Haidt. Thank you, Councilwoman.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you so much to you and your team for all of your work and for the effort you all are undertaking to ensure this is being implemented in every school. And particularly, I wanted to highlight Dr. Abigail for all of her work on this initiative and for meeting with my office. And I look forward to continuing to work with you on this issue. And so, Dr. Haidt, I wanted to pivot to the CTE question.
Yes, thank you. And then, as you indicated, we were down at the Naval Yard to work with the Department of Navy and many other groups down there to ensure that our young people had the opportunities to engage in some of these CTE pathways. And these CTE pathways were in things around transportation and logistics, and in those industries that do a lot of the movement of products and the logistics related to that. It also could deal with financing and those types of things. Quite a few things in the information technology, industrial technology, advanced manufacturing, health, as the council president talked about earlier, and safety and environmental assurance. Those are many of the things related to networks and cybersecurity. And then there are also lots of things around in the digital space. And I would call it, and Dr. Savoy Brooks and I were talking about this earlier today, just like the entertainment industry. But those are things around digital design and music and entertainment management. And then still there's work, particularly in the CTE space, that could be in the entrepreneurial space where young people are learning to establish these businesses themselves as opposed to going to work for someone else. And so those are some of the things that we have talked about. You have already mentioned the solar energy, which is just one facet of renewable, sustainable types of energies that we want to teach our young people, where all of the young people who finish the Frankfurt program were also guaranteed opportunities at PICO upon graduation. Those are the types of industry supporting programs that we would like to see in the district across all of our high schools.
Yes. Well, thank you, Dr. Height. Quickly, because I heard the bell, it would be helpful if each year if we could get a listing of the CTE programs you all are applying for through the PA Department of Education so that we know what's on the horizon. I wanted to get 2 more questions on the record, just so I know time is up, but I wanted to get these on the record for the hearing. One is I received a call from an administrator from a school regarding the sports policy for outside attendees to attend sports games. And then secondly, I wanted to circle back to something that I know we worked on very early on in my tenure, which was addressing any GIS challenges in the application system at the school district to ensure that children and families are routed to the correct public school during their application process. So I just wanted to put those 2 questions and comments really on the record to be addressed to the chair so that we can move forward. Thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Height and your team.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Catherine Gilmore Richardson. Thank you, Dr. Height, and to your entire team. I'm going to ask, we have on deck 5 people testifying. I want to make sure that all your team does not leave, and some of them are here to listen to the folks who have been so patient with us since we started almost 2 hours late to this. So if some of the members of your team could stay on, high-level members of your team, so they can listen to the public testimony. They have been more than patient in waiting till 5:41 to get on. So I'm going to take a 2-minute break and ask our technology professionals to get the folks who are scheduled to testify in the queue. And I'll ask our clerk, Chris Goy, to call them as soon as we have them in the queue. We're going to give everyone 4 minutes who are as part of this public testimony. So as soon as the technology professionals, folks are on board, please let me know so that I can go back to the script and formally have them be part of the public hearing as we close out our public meeting. Again, Dr. Height, it's been such a pleasure working with you. Thank you so very much to you and your entire team.
Yes. Take care.
All right, let's take a 2-minute break and get our folks in the queue. part of this biannual meeting as required by our charter. Could the clerk please acknowledge
Excuse me,
the folks who are
Madam
going to
Chair.
testify?
Excuse me, Madam Chair. We're just going to need a few more seconds to bring in the public participants. Please give us 1 minute.
Okay, you tell me when you're ready.
Okay, great. Madam Chair, council members and participants, we are now live.
Thank you so very much. I want to thank all of the folks who have been in the queue for public testimony. This is the public part of our meeting related to the committee of the whole. Will the clerk please call up the testifiers?
Madam Chair, the first person registered to speak is Dave Hardy.
Mr. Hardy, are you connected?
I'm connected, Councilwoman. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you so very much for your patience. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Okay, my name is David P. Hardy. I am the founder and retired CEO of Boys Latin Charter School, and I'm here tonight speaking, representing the African American Coalition of Charter Schools. The African American Coalition of Charter Schools is a group of Black-founded and led charter school leaders and parents of students attending those schools for the purpose of creating a non-biased system of charter oversight, renewal, and expansion. Our schools are full of students whose families sought a better alternative to their neighborhood school, and most of our students actually do attend a higher performing school. We have 20 brick and mortar schools and over 15,000 students. Our Black Schools Matter campaign is an effort to correct the misinformation that has been spread about public charter schools. Our school staffs are our school staffs are more reflective of our students enrolled in our schools. And we have schools run by some of the most experienced and talented educators in the city. I'm here tonight to make 3 recommendations. First, we need an independent charter authorizer. The present system puts both the district and the charters in an untenable situation. And here's an example. You know, you talk about the state tests. When the district talks about state tests, they call them culturally biased and unreliable. But when they're talking about but they're very willing to use them to evaluate a charter school. even though they don't want to use them to evaluate their own schools. So this whole idea of having a one school group evaluate another is just a bad idea. We need independence to make that work better. The second thing is the lotteries. Lotteries are patently unfair, whether it's for selective admission schools or for charter schools. What lotteries represent is a decision to parse out desirable seats instead of expanding them. Those are schools that people want their children to go to. That in itself means they should be expanded. And then the third thing is the intermediate unit. Our kids, our charter school students, are counted for the funding of the intermediate unit, yet we don't receive any of the services. And in most counties, there is a charter representative on the intermediate unit board. That's not true in Philadelphia. So that's something else that we'd like to see. In closing, I just want to say one thing on a personal note, Madam Councilwoman, that we're going out and looking for a new superintendent, okay? And that superintendent will come in next year at the beginning of September. 4 months later, we're going to be in the midst of a mayoral race. That does not allow this search to attract the people that we're really going to want to attract. And I really fear that what we're going to have is someone that we don't want, or what is going to be more realistic is that we're going to have a substitute between now and the next mayor. So that's just a concern that I want to voice. I know some people have voiced that in the listening sessions that they had for the superintendent search, but I think that is an important point. We can't have a search that's not going to attract people that we really want for the job. That's it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for all your advocacy and all your work, particularly in retirement. The next person.
Madam Chair, Horace Clouden.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Horace Clouden. You know, I sent you some written testimony along with a couple of data sheets. I don't know if you received it or was able to read it. And that was from the school district's own SPR website. And, you know, if you didn't receive it, I just want to highlight a few things. If you did receive it, I just don't understand why no one asked the superintendent, why do we have 21 high schools with 0% in student achievement? You know, that's 15 neighborhood high schools, and that's 9 citywide high schools that have 0% in student achievement. You know, one of the council people brought up Overbrook High School, and he was saying a person with an ankle iron and how would the school receive that person, you know. So let's look at Overbrook. Overbrook, 2017, 2018, the teachers' attendance was only 43% for 95% of the time. And then the following year, it was 56% for 95% of the time. You know, looking at the data, the superintendent always wants to blame, I would say, the victim with their attendance 95% of the time. But the teachers have poor attendance across the school district. This data I gave you will show you that. If not, you can pull it up on the website and look for it for yourself. You know, they also made a statement of that you don't want this new superintendent coming in and maybe be faced with something that the last superintendent started. And that's what this superintendent used, whatever example. Well, here's the example that this superintendent is leaving right now. The K-8s. The K-8s only work for like 11 schools out of 101 schools. They need to change the K-8s back to the K-6, bring back the junior high school 7th, 8th, and 9th, and have your high schools 10th, 11th, and 12th. You know, here again, looking at the data, 92% of the schools are operating at a F. That means per the academic scale, 60 is a D. So they're all coming in under 60%. You know, moving on, here we go with criteria-based schools. Well, just to let the council people know, why is it called criteria-based schools? Well, it was called special admit schools, and they changed it to criteria-based schools. Well, 16 out of your 19 special admit schools slash criteria-based schools were operating at a F, meaning they were coming under the 60% on the academic scale. So that's why when we asked the superintendent, could you describe a special admit school, he all of a sudden puts in criteria-based school. They're not special, they're criteria-based. So here everybody's running around trying to get into the site selection process, but the only thing the site selection process will create is more overcrowding in these schools, i.e. Central, i.e. Masterman, i.e. Engineering and Science. So, and then plus we all must allow, also must allow, even though there's a lottery system, they also must allow for those people with special interest groups to get their children in these schools. So there's still a process that some of these people will go through that won't be this site selection process. Now, moving back to CTE programs, 2 weeks ago, Goals and Guardrails had the superintendent on the hot seat about CTE. So here the CETs are going backwards. The education level is going backwards. I think it went from 55% down to 45%. And because here again, we all must realize in the third grade, these students are testing in at 30% in English and math. They get to eighth grade, they still when I say 30% of the student base is on grade level in English and math. That's in third grade. When they get to the eighth grade, the same 30% is on grade level. That's why your CTEs, we talk CTEs, and that's why they're not doing as good. And the last thing I just want to say is this. Why can't we have driver's ed in these schools for the high school students, and why can't we bring back swimming? Because we have three facilities, training facilities for swimming. Come on, give these students opportunity to break this cycle of poverty. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony and for your patience this evening. The next participant.
Madam Chair, the next participant is Dana Carter.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dana Carter, core member of the Racial Justice Organizing Committee. I have been an educator in Philadelphia and abroad since 2001. It's my pleasure to be here with you all, almost at midnight, but it's okay. The first two things I want to start out by saying is that if you are keeping mastery schools open with the most oppressive discipline practices in Philadelphia while closing Black charter schools, many of them make safe spaces for Black children, the closure process is racist, and I would ask for you to re-examine it. And I'm not a fan of charter schools at all. Please, listen. I'm no fan of charters, but you can't keep mastery schools open and then close the Black charter schools. When you have an understaffed, under-resourced, systemically racist school district that is fighting to silence staff members by passing policy 911, which is a gag order no matter how they try to spin it, I have the original policy, and it made no mention of staff's interactions with media. When you have a school board whose silencing and interaction with the public have reached a level of unconstitutionality where the ACLU had to intervene and represent the plaintiffs, the school board is the defendant and the people are the plaintiffs. And city council members sat here thanking these individuals for their efforts. Have any of you watched someone spilling their hearts out to the school board about issues concerning children, and when the clock hits 2 minutes, because they reduced it from 3 minutes in January, when the clock hits 2 minutes, not only do they cut people off, they call the next person to testify while the other person is still at the microphone. Where is the humanity? 2 city council members wasted the public's time basically questioning why more and Black Latino students need access to magnet schools. However they try to spin it, and I'm not sure if the council members are aware of this, the backlash is racist at its base. It stems from parents who want to keep these schools more white and Asian instead of more Black and Latino. When that same district graduates 30% of its students fully literate and 20% with grade level math skills, meaning over the past 10 years, on average, 70% of the 12th graders leave the school district of Philadelphia without the ability to read fluently, and 80% of the 12th graders are leaving the district without foundational math skills. The data for children in special education and English language learners is alarming, more alarming. Last year, 4.8% of 6 through 12 English language learning students passed their STAR assessment, meaning 95.2% of these children aren't getting the literacy skills needed in order to survive. Some of your parents, some of you learn English as a second language. Imagine if you or your mother or father were students in the school district of Philadelphia today. Would you be able to get to your position? When you establish a culture of closing Philadelphia public schools and opening and not monitoring failing charter schools and have children travel across multiple neighborhoods to find a non-charter high school. And when you come to the elected officials to testify about these issues going on in Philadelphia streets, and the majority of the city council are off somewhere watching Judge Judy or eating crimpets, I don't know, because the cameras are off. And these same elected officials beginning a meeting discussing the children of Philadelphia over 90 minutes late without notifying the participants. You have our email address. And then you don't even give the public the courtesy of being able to testify first. When you have all of these issues, you get 472 murders by November 9th because the people in charge are eating crickets, watching Judge Judy, congratulating oppression, questioning equitable access, and focus on other things that don't include saving the children or the residents of this city. Your actions and the fact that you only come around, some of you only come around when the news cameras are on. If you concentrated on saving the children instead of maintaining adult relationships to keep your city council seat, someone's child would know how to read fluently. Someone's child would be better at math. And someone's child might still be alive. On behalf of my ancestors and yours, do better. I wish you all a powerful, productive, and child-centered school year. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dana Carter. Will the clerk read the name of the next testifier?
Emma Horst Martz.
Hello, everyone. My name is Emma Horst Martz, and I'm an advocate with PennPIRG, the Pennsylvania Public Interest Research Group. We are a statewide advocacy organization based here in Philadelphia. I would like to speak to the issue of lead in school drinking water this evening. It's well proven that lead exposure causes numerous negative health effects, including damage to the nervous system, learning disabilities, and impaired hearing. Lead exposure is unsafe at any level, according to the CDC. Because children spend so much time in school buildings during their prime years of development, lead contamination in school drinking water is particularly dangerous. Philadelphia is one of the largest school districts in the country, with more than 200,000 school-age kids going to 339 schools. And lead in school drinking water is still an issue across our district. That's why we at PennPIRG, with our partners, are calling on the district to allocate between $2 and $4 million of the $1.1 billion in federal ARPA funding to replace the remaining old water fountains with lead filtering hydration stations in all public schools across the city. We have shared a plan to do this with Dr. Height, Reggie McNeil, and Steve Link at the district and have not received a firm commitment to work on this issue. So I was surprised to hear Dr. Height's report on the call that the district is more than halfway through this installation process. It would be great to see an update on the district's public website to reflect up-to-date testing data for each school, lead testing data, and it would be good to see a published updated list of each hydration station in each of the schools that have been installed so far and the locations of where the district intends to install future hydration stations and what the timeline for that work is. I would echo Councilman Green's point about transparency and providing updated information to the public. I know our communities are really concerned about the issue of lead in drinking water in our schools, and they want to know more about the work that's happening to address it, especially as so many of the water fountains are closed because of the pandemic in our schools. The support of City Council is also crucial for this issue, and I'll follow up with each of your offices to share materials and engage further. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony and for your patience this afternoon. Will the clerk read the name of the next testifier?
Lisa Haver.
Ms. Haver, are you on the line?
Yes, thank you, Council Member Quinona Sanchez. Good afternoon. Excuse me, good evening. My name is Lisa Haver. I'm co-founder and coordinator of the Alliance for Philadelphia Public Schools. For almost 10 years, APS members have attended all meetings of the SRC and now the board. Our members, who are parents, educators, former educators, and community members, testify on all issues that concern members of the Philadelphia public school community. And we report on actions of the board. As you know, we send our reports to council every month. Whatever the issue, whether it be trash mountains in schoolyards, disruptive bell schedules, leveling, asbestos, and other toxic conditions with which Council Member Green spoke of, safety, lack of support staff, so on, they all come back to two main issues. One, lack of public engagement and transparency, and two, spending priorities that do not make our students a priority. Last December, as Ms. Carter just mentioned, the board instituted speaker suppression policies for members of the public who wish to be heard at public meetings. The number of adult speakers is now capped at 30, no matter how many official items are on the agenda for passage, and no matter how many crises students and parents are dealing with. They are cut off at exactly 2 minutes. In the middle of the sentence, in the middle of a word, it doesn't matter. Council must take a stand against the silencing of their constituents at board meetings and against the board attempting to further silence district employees. Council members today have expressed concern about the revision of Policy 911, but it's important to remember that district employees are already being silenced and with little outcry from council members. What do Philadelphia students need? That is not a mystery. It's what kids across city lines have. School libraries with certified teacher librarians, reading specialists, enough support staff, kindergarten aides, counselors, NTAs, and most importantly, smaller class size. They need, as Councilmember Gim just said, many more mental health services. Our children don't need money spent or more consultants at 440, more outsourcing of district services, more money diverted to privately managed schools which claim to be public schools. Philadelphia students will not get what they need as long as there is no accountability. The board does not hold the superintendent accountable. Council does not hold the board accountable. The mayor could not be any more hands-off on public school issues when he promised just the opposite when we got our Board of Education returned to us. A couple of weeks ago, APS members stood with district students and educators and members of CASTA, the Principals Union, to ask what the leadership of this city is doing to protect our students, our children, against gun violence. Our kids don't need more standardized tests or test prep. They need the adults at 440 and at City Hall to do everything they can to give them what they need to make their schools and their neighborhoods safe. Thank you.
Thank you for your advocacy and your testimony. The clerk, any additional testifiers?
Madam Chair, there are none.
Thank you very much. This completes the witness list for this evening. I'd like to ask if there's anyone else on the phone or on the line to testify. Seeing none, this is the conclusion of the public meeting and the public hearing. We are recessed to the call of the chair. Thank you all very much. I particularly want to thank the public testifiers for their patience in our delay startup this afternoon for the hearing. Thank you all so very much. This concludes our public hearing.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Chairwoman.